Anthony, this is a very weird song to start the show with. What are we doing? How are we playing closing time?
It's
to start
closing
the
time,
show?
correct?
For who? We just got here.
Chris Russell and Matt Essick.
Yeah, but that's not their show.
You're right.
What do
We need a restart.
I kind of feels that way. It's the Hoffman show. It's a little loose in the summertime here on the Team 980. Always live as well on the free Odyssey app. I have no control over the program, despite the fact that my name is on it. That's Anthony Haney. He's the producer of the show, and sometimes he exercises too much freedom.
Yeah. I didn't really have anything to say after that.
Yeah, you couldn't have anything else to say before it either. But yet, here we are, leaving all the talking to me. We got a fun show today. We got a bunch of great guests, including Ben Golliver at 6 o'clock, live from Las Vegas, where Cooper Flagg has, if he hadn't already, announced himself as the next guy in professional basketball. He's 17. He's still going to play at Duke next year, but he was awesome yesterday in the Team USA versus USA Select Team scrimmage that was attended by, amongst others, Ben Golliver of the Washington Post. So Ben will join us to talk about it. A man who is a future wizard. Can't even call him a man. He's 17. A young man who's hopefully a future wizard. We'll get the lowdown on Cooper Flagg coming up at 6 o'clock. Right now, though, we're going to start the show with a list that has been making the rounds over the last couple of days. And that is the ESPN list by Aaron Schatz, who we've had on the show before, about the best young talent in the NFL and who's got the most of it. And I think this list is particularly interesting, Anthony, to talk about for the Commanders because in a rebuild, you'd hope to be pretty high on said list. You'd hope that your future is incredibly bright. But I think what we'll discover quickly is the Commanders are so early in their rebuild that they're kind of where I think we hope some of these top teams are next year, where instead of some like guessing games of maybe this draft class is really good, we know, and that makes us feel really good going into Adam Peters' draft number 2 and an eventual future that involves a whole lot of winning. The standard here is based on a combination of factors that Schatz and ESPN have come up with. Number of starts made by players under 25 years old, number of snaps played by 25 years old or younger players, quality of play, age adjusted to capture the fact that a 21-year-old player of X ability will likely improve more than a 23-year-old player of X ability, with extra consideration given a Pro Bowl and All-Pro selections, value and length of player contracts, relative importance of positions, in particular with quarterbacks being more important than running backs, off-ball linebackers and specialists being less important, draft value added in the 24 draft, expected key starters and reserves under 25, and significant injuries or suspensions that will affect the 2024 availability of players under 25 years old. So, Anthony, have you looked completely at this list yet?
I have not.
Do you have a guess for who number 1 is?
Best talent?
Under 25.
I would probably lean Seahawks.
No. Good guess. My guess is they can't be terribly far down this list, although as I scroll, there's a couple of other birds ahead of them. They're number 10. But they obviously, what they got last year in Devin Witherspoon in the draft, their left tackle, Charles Cross, is still under 25. They've got some great ones. But the Houston Texans are number 1.
Yeah.
C.J. Stroud, Will Anderson, Derek Stingley, 3 premier positions, all blue chip level players. They are easily, as Schatz writes, number 1 on the list. And the initial player values that I used to put together our list, the Texans have the top 2 players in under 25 value. Stroud is by far the number 1 young asset in the NFL, and Defensive Rookie of the Year, Will Anderson is the other. So, yeah. They've also got guys like Kamari Lassiter, Tank Dell, who had a breakout season but is 24 and is coming off the broken fibula. 2 of their offensive linemen that are starters are under 25. So they have a ton of dudes that are under 25, and who better under 25 in the NFL right now than C.J. Stroud. So that's not surprising. I think the next team is kind of surprising because you don't realize how young they are. and that's the Detroit Lions. Penei Sewell, under 25. Aiden Hutchinson, that one you probably could have guessed. Sam Laporta, obviously first rounder last year. But don't forget, Amon-Ra St. Brown still isn't 25 years old. He plays like he's 80. I mean that as a compliment. He just has that veteran savvy, veteran know-how, veteran toughness. But he's still stupid young. So I think what becomes interesting for them is when they got to start paying some of these dudes. But whether it's Jahmyr Gibbs, Brian Branch, they've got just drafted Terrion Arnold, who's a lot of people really like. This corner class was all over the place. So, yeah, they are.
They got Kirby. They got Jamison Williams.
Jack Campbell, middle linebacker. So, yeah, they're loaded. The rest of the top 10, this one's kind of interesting. Baltimore Ravens were 30th in this list last year. They are 3rd this year. I think people have accepted that Kyle Hamilton might be the best defensive player in football, maybe certainly a top 5. He's sick. Zay Flowers, Tyler Linderbaum, their center. So they have some rookies that people kind of like. Nate Wiggins. We'll see about Isaiah Likely at tight end. Obviously, he's not a rookie, but he's still only 24. So there's a good amount of talent there. The Falcons, which is hilarious because one of their guys they count as a blue chip player here is Michael Penix, who's barely under 25, even though he just got drafted. Like, he turned 24 in May. He'll be on this list for 1 year, and if in an ideal world, he makes 0 starts, which I think is hilarious. But Bijan, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, etc. The Bears, obviously Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, but also Braxton Jones. Braxton Jones left last year. But Darnell Wright, their number 1 pick last year. The Cardinals, you'd expect here. And to me, when I look at the Bears, the Cardinals, these are the teams that hopefully Washington next year, you're like, oh, that's where they were a year ago. Because a year ago, the Cardinals were 28th on this list. But now Paris Johnson looks like he was a good pick. Marvin Harrison Jr. comes in. Michael Wilson, 3rd-round pick, seems like he's a real player. B.J. Ojolari, he's only 22 years old. Had 4 sacks last year, but is going to grow in year 2 of Jonathan Gannon's defense. So, and plus, people love their draft. So, that's the kind of team that I look at. Can the Commanders jump into the top 10 next year, just like Arizona did? Jacksonville is at 7. Trevor Lawrence still under 25. The Rams are at 8 with guys like Puka Nacua. They also have some incredible interior linemen, including Steve Avila. The Packers, they're the youngest team in the league, even though Jordan Love, Christian Watson, amongst those that graduated, but they're still top 10, and the Seahawks are number 10. Where do you think the Commanders are, Anthony?
Based off last year, and then you bring in who we got in Jaden Daniels and some of our other guys. I would probably say 20, maybe.
I would have guessed
20, 21.
I would have guessed like somewhere in the 20 to 23 range. They're actually 18th.
Where were we last year? That's what I want to know.
Last year they were 15th. And notable graduated players, Brian Robinson, Sam Cosmi, and Jamin Davis.
Okay.
Davis graduating actually might help them with the way that he's played so far, even if I think that there's interesting upside for him this year.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the thing that's hard is outside of Jaden, are there any other blue chip young players on this roster? And this is where next year becomes so huge for them. Can they figure out how to get multiple first-round picks, or do some of their guys that they got this year hit? Most notably, Johnny Newton, second rounder. Ben Sinnott, they're both 22. Mike Sainristil's 23. Jahan Dotson's 24. I mean, Emmanuel Forbes is obviously under 25, but he was one of the worst corners in the league, according to the advanced metrics and everything. Didn't have the ball production. He's only 23 years old. But this is what happens when you miss in multiple drafts. And, this is the thing that I think is interesting for the Commanders moving forward is they know they have to be better here, and they have to draft really well, and that's how you build a team because of the way the contracts are structured and all that kind of stuff. But they do not have a foundational base of young talent. And I also think that's part of the reason why they went with some older players this year. Guys like Sainristil, 23, Daniels, 23, is they don't have time to wait necessarily, and they need to have some guys that have a little maturity to them, even if they're on rookie contracts, which is also nice in its own way. but before they can go taking swings on 21-year-olds like some of these other teams have where it's worked out for them. So the youth is certainly not on the Commanders' side here, but I do think that what they're trying to do now is put a base underneath them in a similar way, again, to Arizona last year, that they can take some bigger swings next year when they still probably will have a decent pick. If not, depending on how Jaden plays as a rookie and how much he struggles, a really high pick again.
What situation would you rather be in? I feel like the Texans, they are number one, but I feel as though they have like really heavy hitters on their team that carry a larger value. So you got the C.J. Strouds of the world, you got the Will Andersons. But if you look at the Lions, they have impact players all over the field on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball. I just think from a depth standpoint, I would probably want to be situated where the Lions are as opposed to, having a couple players under 25 that, are having this impact.
Well, the depth is one thing. The high-end talent and having the quarterback is another. I think I'd rather be the Texans because the Texans have C.J. Stroud, and he might just be him. And like if Mahomes ever falls off, it seems like Stroud's the next guy up, kind of in that right age range. But I think it's an interesting question. I'd also be curious to know on the phones at 301-230-0980, how do you feel about the Commanders' young talent and where they are as we are about to embark on season 1, if you will, of their rebuild? We'll take your calls on this next. It's the Hoffman Show. Taking your calls at 301-230-0980 on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Haney, was Essex showing you anything breaking news important? Or is he just showing you jokes?
Jokes.
Okay. I don't want to know what they are then, because then there's a chance that everyone gets fired.
Yeah. That's why I just kept it short, simple. Jokes.
Jokes. Matt Essig making an appearance back on the show. Chainsmokers don't want to be told to go away. Do you know, Anthony, the Chainsmokers are Syracuse grads?
Really? What year?
My year. At least Drew, I believe, is his name. I didn't know him, but I think Drew from the Chainsmokers and I are classmates.
Did they ever perform on campus?
Maybe. I didn't go.
Oh.
Like, for all I know, I missed out. That's not me being like, it's too cool. Like, they might have. I wasn't super into the party scene where the Chainsmokers would have been performing. So, yeah, I don't know. It wasn't a Newhouse kid. I wish he had come by Z89 when I was running the music station. Hey, buddy.
That would have been tough.
You got this new up-and-coming group, the Chainsmokers. Turns out they're pretty good. Anyway, yeah, that's your fun fact of the music, the rejoin music that Anthony chose, which is better than Closing Time that he chose to open the show.
Closing Time is a great. I'm gonna have to run that one back.
It's a great
later into the course.
You can only play it in the last segment.
Yeah.
Like, if you wanted to make that a thing every day, we could. It's kind of, I would say, kind of played out. I think it's a little, it's trying a little too hard.
I'll surprise you one day. I won't do it every day, but I'll surprise you one day and see if you pick up on it.
Closing Time. Anyway, you know who's probably heard of that song? No one listed on the under 25 talent list that ESPN put together. So the Commanders are at 18. Here are the teams that are in their neighborhood / ahead of them. The Jets are at 11 because we went through the top 10 last segment. The Jets are at 11. Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson carrying the load there. The Colts with Richardson and Latu. See, like, the Colts are an interesting team to me in comparison to the Commanders because Richardson is young. Like, he was young when he was drafted. I think he might have been the youngest player in the draft last year. Latu is a little bit older, but both of them are massive injury histories. Then you got, like, Adonai Mitchell, who some people think is going to be awesome and some people think is going to be out of the league in 2 years. And then your other two receivers are Alec Pierce, who's very, very good, but is 24. Josh Downs is 23. And then, like, Juju Brents and Jalen Jones, 24, 22 respectively. They're very good. You know, Nick Cross may start at safety. He's 22. But it's not like they have a bunch of gangbusters that are under 25. Like, the Colts are a very solid football team who I think are going to win a pretty solid amount of games and be competitive for a playoff spot. But I don't know that I look at their situation under 25 and I'm like, oh, yeah, they're way ahead of the Commanders, even though they're ranked 11th and Washington is ranked 18th.
Yeah, I would agree. But also just seeing as to what Anthony Richardson did when he was, healthy, was a little scary. I think he's going to have a breakout year. He's going to learn to, slide. He's going to learn not to, run as much. Because if he doesn't bang his head on the ground, I think the Colts are making a little bit more noise than they did last year. I mean, I think that's probably what they were, like, banking on when they made this list, him staying healthy and just being able to impact games that way.
For sure. And here would be the question I ask you, though. If like, quarterback is driving this. Now, Latu could be a 10-sack guy this year. So it's not like this is the only thing driving it, right? But if quarterback is driving this predominantly, who would you rather have for the next 5 years? Would you rather have Richardson or would you rather have Daniels? I'd rather have Daniels.
But they also have Steichen. And the offense
I like Cliff. I would rather have Steichen than Cliff.
Exactly. So I think when you look at the situation itself and not just the player, I think it's a little different.
That's fair. But player-wise, I'd rather have
Player-wise, I'd probably
Daniels
go JD.
Because I trust him. In terms of, not only do I think like he's got it all, tools, mentally, whatever, but like, despite the frame concerns, Richardson has been hurt at Florida and he's been hurt in the pros. JD's not had that problem. So I think that's worth pointing out.
Yeah.
The Giants actually rank ahead of the Commanders at 13. Kayvon Thibodeau, Deontay Banks, Malik Neighbors, the main drivers here. Micah McFadden, a linebacker, another guy. Wan'Dale Robinson, Daniel Bellinger. Tyler Nubin got drafted as a safety. So there's obviously real talent there with Thibodeau, Banks, Neighbors. But again, like ranking, like part of this is, another part of their rankings were, snaps and starts. And the more, or the amount of young guys playing boosts some of these teams up, I think, over Washington, where I would actually take the talent and the caliber at certain position. Like if we're doing it based off positions, I would rather be in Washington's case than New York's. But I do think we're going to talk about this with Sean Mraz later in the show. Is Hard Knocks has their second episode of the Giants offseason series tonight. We're going to talk with Mraz a little bit. I think the Giants' talent is actually a little bit underrated at this point. And I've crapped on the Giants as much as anybody because I still don't think they're very good. And I still think the Daniel Jones problem is a problem for them. But they've got some talent elsewhere on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Outside of the quarterback situation, they're not bad. And I think that's what kept them in some games last year. The fact that, they have young defensive players and they were out there being impactful. We know about Kayvon Thibodeau and what he did to Charles Leno several times last season and even the year before. So we know they have talent. They've shown the spurts. And it's more so just like being consistent and putting it all together. And it's tough to win games when, Daniel Jones is your quarterback or you just have.
Or you can't protect him or both. And that was, that's been the problem for them the last couple of years.
What was Andrew Tom? Was he on the list?
He's now 25, so he graduated.
Okay.
They need Evan Neal to graduate. That would help their case. The Chiefs are actually 14. See, this is where I'm like, all right, Trent McDuffie's really good. George Karlaftis is really good. And I guess they had the thing was with the Chiefs though. They had so many dudes in the secondary play so well last year. You're just like, I don't know. I guess they can plug and play in the secondary. Yep. So yeah, you had Brian Cook, Shamari Connor, Joshua Williams, Nick Bolton's still only 24. They still count Rashee Rice as a positive. We'll see how long his suspension or suspensions are. Chargers. Does anybody like the Chargers' young talent? See, this is where
Not
I'm like,
their receivers, no.
Like they count Quentin Johnston as a blue chip player.
Terrible.
He was awful last year.
Yeah.
The Bills, Kincaid, Osiris Torrance, Gregory Rousseau. Like Rousseau's fine. Maybe he turns out to be really good. He had an awesome game against the Commanders, but like that's not who he was the entire year. I do think the Bills have been planning for some of the mass exodus though, and they have some younger guys like Christian Brentford, Keon Coleman. Obviously, Coleman they just drafted at receiver, but Benford's a starting quarterback, Kyer Elam. So they've got some dudes. The Bengals are 17 basically because Jamar Chase is still under 25. They got a couple other guys who we'll see. Mims, obviously a 21-year-old that they just took in the draft. Super interesting. Washington at 18, who we mentioned. Carolina's at 19, Bryce Young, Ike Ekwonu. But like when they talk about this is the thing I sometimes don't like about these lists, right? Ike Ekwonu last year and the last couple of years has been awful. Like since he's been drafted. 2 years, right? He's 2 years in the league. Last year wasn't his rookie year?
Yeah.
He's been terrible. Like to the point that I was listening to the Athletic Football Show talk O-line. It was Robert Mays, the host, and Brandon Thorne. And Robert was just like, when do we start asking questions that we ask about like Evan Neal about Ike Ekwonu? And Thorne was like, if it doesn't turn around this year. Because Frank Reich has not had a good run of creating good O-lines. Like he turned the Indy O-line that was awesome into something that was awful. And instantly when Reich left, they became good again. So sorry to the Terps legend, but buddy, your scheme doesn't seem to be super friendly here. But like Ekwonu's been god awful, and they have him listed as a blue chip player. I don't understand that. If you're gonna say like Ekwonu's a blue chip player, then so is Emmanuel Forbes. Like based off draft position and pedigree alone, because it's certainly not based off play. And this is the thing that I just sometimes don't get about these national lists, and I don't pretend to know super in depth about every team. And I do have so much respect for guys and women who cover this on a national level because it's so much to know. And this is why I love a guy like Mays. I so much respect for Robert because I know him personally. I know he puts in the work, and like he's spending days watching tape, and he's on the road and he's talking to coaches, and like he has an actual real scope of the league. But the lack of consistency in some of these lists, and where like the default is let's hammer a team like the Commanders, I think is what sometimes gets me annoyed this time of year.
Yeah. Playing devil's advocate, though, if you were to look at the Commanders from a, like, just face value, which player outside of JD would you say has the most upside or could, be in these conversations with some of these other top 25 players or under 25 players?
This is my thing, though, is Ike Ekwonu doesn't belong. It's more about, like, for Carolina, Ekwonu doesn't belong than I think for Washington. Like, I actually think 18's about right for Washington.
Yeah.
I'm just like, there's other teams that we've mentioned where I'm like, I don't know, are those dudes that much better? Like, Cincinnati's right above them, and, like, DJ Turner, Cam Taylor-Britt, like, those dudes started a bunch of games and are going to be their 2 starting outside corners. Like, okay. And obviously they were better than Emmanuel Forbes, but, like, Emmanuel Forbes is interesting. I think Washington also just doesn't have a lot of young talent because some of their draft picks down. Like, is KJ Henry moving the needle? Maybe on another team. I think KJ Henry, like, played all right last year, but he's not going to get mentioned in this article as a 5th-round pick because he was on a 4-win football team and was a role player on a unit that underperformed. But this is where, like, obviously Newton, Sinnott, Sainristil, etc., if Dotson can get back involved. But, like, here's the guy, actually, that's not mentioned that is I don't want to say a cataclysmic miss, but, like, is a really, really bad miss by ESPN on this. Where's Quan Martin? Right? I was just, like, thinking, like, who are the higher picks that Washington's had? Quan Martin's 24 years old. His 2nd-round pick last year. And he was the best draft pick that Rivera made maybe in 4 years, potentially.
And he came on strong towards the end of the season,
He was awesome at the end of the year, and this staff loves him. Where is his name on this list? So that's the kind of stuff where you're just like, come on, let's do better. But it's hard because ranking an entire league and having in-depth knowledge of every single depth chart is, like, damn near impossible. You do that when you're, an NFL director of pro personnel.
Yeah.
Not someone writing on a website, with all due respect to those of us who write and talk, etc. Did I just undercut the entire profession?
I think so, Craig.
We should go to commercial. Coming up at 5 p.m., Sean Mraz, WFAN New York. Tonight, Hard Knocks, episode 2 of the Giants offseason. What did he make of episode 1 and the moves that Joe Schoen made this offseason? We'll talk to Mraz coming up at 5 p.m. Right now, though, the Brandon Ayuk story still lingering, and wanted to get Logan's thoughts on it. So when we recorded Take Command this morning, we did just that, in case you haven't heard that fine podcast yet, where we also made an all NFC East offense team. So we went position by position. It was really fun. Definitely worth checking out. And just search Take Command in your favorite podcast app. It'll be right there. But the Ayuk discussion we wanted to bring to you here on the Hoffman Show. So without further ado, voila, here it is.
It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. Take Command Podcast. I'm Craig Hoffman. He is Logan Paulsen. In the dead heat of summer here. Logan, I do mean heat. It is offensive outside.
It is hot. You know, I do a lot of coaching outside, and you're kind of battling like temperature control or sun protection, and so it's a tough time to be outside coaching. But
I also did some coaching this morning and had to walk 3 blocks outside to get there. It was
sweaty. How sweaty were you when you got there? Very sweaty.
Sweatier than I wanted to be. It's nasty out there. But anyway, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about the sports, which unfortunately means we're going to talk about Brandon Ayuk's TikTok. We'll get to that in one moment. Then afterwards, we'll reward ourselves with some off-season silly fun. Who is the all NFC East defense team? The 33rd team did a fun little poll on their Instagram page and came up with a squad. Apparently, a lot of Eagles fans voted, but we'll give our own all NFC East offense going into the season. We'll do defense later in the week or next week as well. But we do start, Logan, with Brandon Ayuk's TikTok. Yes, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see the image that made so many people lose their minds over the last couple of days. A still image, which I always do find this kind of funny, Logan, is like, TikTok is trying to be Instagram while Instagram is trying to be TikTok, and YouTube is trying to be both. It's like, oh, it's a picture in a carousel. You mean Instagram? No, he posted it on TikTok. But it is a still image of a Commanders practice rep with Jaden Daniels at quarterback. They're in a 2-back set. None of the wide receivers are visible on the screen. You can see a lot of the defensive formation as well. And that is the thing that caused much consternation in both 49ers and Commanders land. Logan, I talked about this on the radio a bit on Monday. We had Brian Mitchell on to talk about it as well.
What did P. Mitch have to say about it?
I will tell you after you tell me what you think about it, because I don't want to say what I think before I hear what you think, because I'm genuinely interested in how big of a deal / what significance, if any, you put on this TikToking by Brandon Ayuk.
I mean, I'm not a big deal kind of guy. The thing I did kind of reconcile after we talked about this a couple days ago, I think we might have talked about it before you did your show, is just that I think this is the way that the new player is going. They have more access to the fan than ever. They have more, they can connect with each other better than ever. And I was like, man, I guess this is just the direction that the players are going to use to influence teams. They have more power than ever. They have more money than ever. Like, this just seems like the direction it's going to go. And it's kind of changing. And, my old school, like, hard nose was like, oh, it's changing for the worse. Like, guys should just shut up and play football. And then I was watching The Air Up There. Are you familiar with that movie at all? It's with Kevin Bacon. Anyway, It's a long story short. It's a basketball movie. Kevin Bacon plays a coach, and he's recruiting these different college kids. And in the beginning of the movie, he recruits this really kind of snotty guy who's like, I want to be, sign a contract that I'm going to be starting year 1 or whatever it is. And I thought, you know what? It actually hasn't changed that much. We just get to see it a little bit more. Players are trying to influence teams. He's trying to influence teams. I think the one thing that kind of bugs me about it is like, unless he asked Daniels to post that, it is kind of a messed up thing to do, because like, everyone knows they're sharing film. They're probably talking through stuff, whatever. But then you post it, and like, that gets people in a lot of trouble. It gets people in a lot of trouble within organizations. I've seen dudes get cut for that kind of stuff. And again, they're not going to cut Jaden Daniels, but it is something that I'm kind of like, be a good buddy, help him out. But in terms of like the player, my initial reaction was kind of salty, but I was like, oh, like this is what players are always going to do. They're going to take their grievance is public. They're going to try and get the fans involved. They're going to try and garner fan support to get the biggest contract they possibly can get. And right now Brandon Ayuk has the situation of the most unique leverage because his best friend or one of his best friends is playing quarterback as the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders. And obviously Adam Peters knows the staff there, knows the front office there. Like, it seems like a natural trade opportunity. So why not milk that and grease that as much as you can so you can get the best contract value for you as a player. So that element I think I've reconciled with. It's like kind of posting of your buddy's film that might get him in trouble that I'm not super stoked on. But again, like, I think this is part of the new landscape for every player, not just NFL players, MLB, NBA also.
I don't know that this has ever been said this succinctly before, but you, me, and Brian Mitchell are on the same page.
Really?
Yes. Like,
nice.
We all, I think, look at this as fairly annoying. That Brandon Ayuk would put Jaden Daniels in this spot. And again, like, did he ask? Did Jaden say yes? Like, these are all relevant questions, relatively speaking. This is not a huge deal. And I asked this question open-ended to Brian, and he said no. I was like, does this change what you think of Jaden? He's like, no. And I was like, I agree. I think it's worth asking the question as like a journalist interviewing him or someone, just trying to make sure that we ask the right questions to create the right context. To be clear, I wasn't asking that question of Brian to say like, oh yeah, this is. But if he did say it does, well, that's interesting. But I don't think this changes what I think of Jaden Daniels, what I think of him as a leader, what I think of him as the face of the franchise, up and coming, any of that stuff. Honestly, I think the thing that is so, for lack of a better word, triggering for so many Washington fans is we have tried so hard to get the mess out of here. And I don't know, I feel weird using we there. Like, I don't even know who we're talking about. Fans, the organization, the Washington football ecosystem has been like, okay, we've been messy as hell for 25 years under Dan Snyder, and messy in every way you can be on and off the field. And now we have competent people here. We have good people here. We have professionals. Mess is not what we do anymore. And the fact that Brandon Ayuk is bringing messiness to the Commanders by posting their film and bringing Jaden into the contract stuff, I think is everyone's like, oh, no, we don't do this, please, no. And like it causes an emotional, like you had, like I had, frankly, an emotional reaction that once you take a second to step back and think about what is going on here, really isn't that big of a deal. Because I think on a macro level, you're 100% right. This is nothing new. From guys who are friends that are not on the same team watching film together, which I actually could spin as a positive if I really wanted to. And I don't think I'm even spinning it. Like, Brandon Ayuk has played under Kyle Shanahan, which I don't have to explain to you, certainly, like what kind of detail and what kind of thought goes into the way Kyle coaches. And thus, I assume Brandon Ayuk's understanding of NFL defenses and NFL offenses. So Jaden watching film with a guy who's been around the league for a couple of years, especially with the coach that he has, I think is ultimately a good thing. But taking a picture of that and sharing it on TikTok is messy, but it also is not like a competitive advantage situation. It's not like he just gave away the Commanders' entire offense.
No.
Like, there's nothing, next to nothing that a team could get out of this. Oh, the Commanders are going to use two backs. Like, yeah, they're going to use two backs. It's not new information. And certainly, by the time training camp rolls around and all the fan videos are on, and like, you're going to get way more scouting information from fan videos that are there during training camp than you are the single picture that Brandon Ayuk put. 100%. It's just the messiness of it. And that's the thing that is, I think, unbecoming. And if I was Adam Peters and Dan Quinn, I'd be like, hey, Jaden, can you tell your boy to not?
Yeah, no, I think that's exactly right. I think the only thing that makes it messy is that you are setting kind of a precedent a little bit, like how you handle this, right? Do you call Jaden and say, hey man, like we're not doing this. We're not kind of putting our stuff out there. We're not sharing with other people. And then how do you get that message to the team? It's just something that I could see them having to address this. Not like it's not a huge deal, but just kind of, hey guys, reminder, we're not sharing film with other teams. We're playing that stuff pretty close to the vest, especially we're not putting it on social media. And just remember, when you give that clip to somebody, they can do what they want with it. So, let's be a little bit more fastidious with how we handle that. So I think that's probably something to be addressed, and again, like, who knows, maybe Jaden said it was okay. I just think the whole thing with Brandon Ayuk, it's just, it's colored him a little bit differently in my perspective, honestly. Like the way he's like live streaming conversations saying they don't want me, they don't want this. And I understand the motivation behind it as a player. Like if I was representing him, I'd want him to push like this to see if I could get the San Francisco 49ers.
Well, I was going to ask, like, would you? Because if you're John Lynch and whoever replaced Adam Peters running that 49ers front office, like, are you looking at IU like, oh man, now our feet to the fire? Like, it doesn't change the facts on the ground of their salary cap situation, what they think of him as a player. If anything, it makes him more annoying and less likely to keep around.
It makes him more annoying, I think, but also it's like I think one of the things about contract negotiations is making sure that you've established leverage, right? So like, for example, if you keep that behind closed doors, let's just say hypothetically, he doesn't need to live stream it necessarily, but the fact that he's talking to Jaden Daniels, who's now the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders, and then Jaden now has influence, I'm assuming, and he rightfully should influence over, the front office a little bit, saying, hey man, like I'd love to have that guy here. That's my guy. I want him in the building. I think that is the thing. Now everybody knows that Jaden is now going to probably advocate for him. This is all speculation, obviously. That Jaden would advocate to get him here. Adam Peters now has that in his ear. The 49ers know that. The Commanders know that. It's everybody's chips are on the table. And it is an element of the negotiation that gives him as an individual a little bit more leverage against the 49ers. Now, I think it's annoying. Like if I was John Lynch, I'd be like, this is annoying. Don't do that. But it's out of my control. And I think if you watch Deebo Samuel's contract negotiation, it rings very similar to that from a couple of years ago. Like he was posting all this stuff about how they don't want me back, how I want to go here, and how this team contacted me, and Pittsburgh's interested, and look at me and Mike Tomlin talking or whatever. Like there was all this stuff around that, and it just feels like Ayuk has followed the same mold. He's just picked the Washington Commanders as the avenue of kind of that. This circus or the mess that you're describing to create leverage against the 49ers.
Do you think Adam looks at the situation any differently? Like he knows Ayuk. He probably is one of the people that identified to draft him. Like this guy fits what we want to do. If I'm Adam, it doesn't really change. Like I know who Brandon Ayuk is. The social media activity, I probably knew that maybe that was a quote unquote risk. I know him. I know his personality, and maybe I know that he would do that kind of stuff, and it doesn't actually change, even if people on the outside are learning about it. I know exactly who he is as a player. I know what kind of value contractually I'd put on him based off whatever formulas and the mix of art and science that is deciding a contract value and a trade value. By the way, if you're Adam, does this change? And would it change if it wasn't Adam Peters and it was a new general manager who wasn't the assistant GM in the place that Ayuk is currently under contract?
If anybody is going to handle this the most effectively, it's him. And I think he got to see kind of Brandon Ayuk's whole evolution and development in San Francisco, excuse me. And what I mean by that is like Brandon Ayuk, if you remember correctly, didn't start out like gangbusters, right? Everyone was a little bit disenfranchised with him. They didn't like how he was working. They didn't like how he blocked. They didn't like his professionalism. And so obviously this, I don't want to call him out, but like there's a lack of professionalism, let's say, with Brandon Ayuk that was stirring earlier. Now, obviously, he got that worked out. He's one of the best receivers in football. Like, I want him to be a Washington Commander. You know what I mean? But I think if anybody knows the person, it's going to be Adam Peters. Like, he's been in him with the building. He understands kind of the bumps and bruises that every individual has, right? If you're talking about Logan Paulson, like, he's a little bit too type A for me, and I don't want that in my, whatever it is, right? Everyone's got their thing. But does that personality fit here in Washington? And I think no one's better equipped to kind of handle that than Adam Peters, because like you said, he's part of the staff that drafted him. He understands the person really well because you've been around him. It's so interesting. Like, we talk about Deshaun Jackson a lot on the show. Like, I actually thought Deshaun was a pretty good teammate overall. You know what I'm saying? But he does have this negative reputation for kind of being, loud and outspoken, right? But he still fit. I could see how he would fit with certain teams really, really well. And
right.
I think that's having that knowledge of the individual is incredibly important in this example. And he has that knowledge.
Yeah, I think that there is also a factor in terms of the development of Jaden as a leader. Where do you want to bring that buddy in where all of a sudden he's now like, hanging out with Ayuk all the time? Does it change his relationship with guys like Luke McCaffrey? Like guys like Terry, Jahan. And that was a point that Brian brought up that I thought was really good. He's like, if you're Terry McLaurin or Jahan Dotson, especially watching this, Like, what are you thinking? You're like, wait, you clearly want to bring in this guy to replace me? How's like, what does that mean? And so that is another part of this, like the talk about the personal, like human dynamics is, I think most of these guys like aren't paying attention that much. Like Terry probably laughs at this. Jahan probably laughs at this and is like, the dudes being dudes. But there's also a chance that they don't. There's also a chance that, there may be more to this story that we currently know in terms of what Jaden's told people or think, the league is small. People talk. It's a very gossipy league. Like does someone's agent say something to, Terry's agent and says something to Terry and is like, yeah, this guy, Jaden just thinks that you're not a number one. And like, who knows? I don't think that's probably happening because I think Jaden's really mature. And I think Jaden's a pretty smart kid. And I have been so impressed and everyone seems so impressed with him. So again, these are just the things that you bring up to think of like, okay, well, where could it go wrong? But realistically, is it? Probably not. But it's the reason why I think ultimately, like, this is the takeaway, right? If I'm Adam Peters, I give Jaden a call and I go, hey, buddy, like, hope you're having a great offseason. I love Brandon. You know that. But like, we need to keep this off of social media because it's not good for our locker room. It's not going to help establish you as the leader we want you to be. Like, I have no problem with you guys hanging out. I love that you're watching film together, grinding, working. Like, if you want to go work out together, like, that's fine. And I know, I intimately know Brandon's contract situation because I would have been dealing with it if I didn't leave to come here. But you need to tell BA, like, let's keep this off of social and keep you out of it because whether he winds up here or not, it's better if it's quiet for right now. And that's what I would do, I think, if I was Adam Peters. I think that's probably the best thing for the Commanders. I don't know if it's the best thing for Ayuk, but I think it's probably actually good for Ayuk at this point. Like, he's kind of made his point. Yeah. But that seems like the responsible, best outcome here moving forward.
That was a fantastic speech, by the way. Fantastic, delivering of the message. I really felt like I was like, oh man, he's talking to Jaden Daniels right now. It was really good. Yeah, I think that's totally fine. I think, and the other thing, like you mentioned, like the Jaden Daniel or the Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin, like how do they feel about it? This is something that is understood, but like never spoken in NFL locker rooms. Like they're always, if something better happens, they're going to do it. And so this is like the truth that's always underlying everything, every day of your NFL career. Certain guys feel it more acutely than others, like obviously like I felt it like to the max because like every day was like really intense. But there's even with a guy like Terry, who is somewhat impeachable in the Washington area, like if something better came along, for example, like let's say prime Calvin Johnson is available and he says, I want to come to Washington. Like the
Terry, you're the number two. Sorry, buddy.
The team's
and if we got to ship you out, we'll ship you out.
Yeah, the team's going to do it. And so this does kind of bring that to light, but I do think this is another opportunity and why I trust Adam to be like, hey, man, like I'd be lying to you, the receivers, if there's something we didn't look into. We love you guys, but we're always looking to get better. And so in the same way that you got to talk to Jaden, I think you probably got to talk to these guys. So you can quell it, but I do think that like these conversations are annoying to have. They're annoying because it's people are unsatisfied with their position. They're nervous. They're not going to be at their best. And so I think that's why this is frustrating, for the front office. For me, it doesn't matter. I don't have to deal with that. I don't have to deal with the personalities, but it does. I'm sure it does. Egos are very sensitive in an NFL locker room. I'm sure this is rubbing some people the wrong way, even if it's imperceptible, but it's something in the back of their mind, but it's always there anyway, is my point. And I think, I think the way you said it is perfect.
And the last thing I'll just add real quick is I think because of Adam's relationship with Ayuk, he is uniquely positioned to have that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Dan could absolutely handle it because Dan's excellent at this kind of stuff. Like that's part of what makes him.
And I would imagine Dan probably does. I don't know. It'd be interesting. I don't have any insight on that, but like your point, like Adam's in a good spot to do it.
Yeah, Adam's great with people, but he knows Brandon Ayuk. And so it comes off different. It's not your coach being like, hey, leave this other guy and this other team alone. It's like, hey, a guy that I called when I thought about drafting you, can you not hang out on social media as much when he's talking about his contract?
Right.
Like there is a level of respect that is a known commodity between Peters and Ayuk that is not there not that Quinn doesn't respect Ayuk. They just don't have a personal relationship.
Sure.
It's going to come off differently from Peters. So this is why it's also good to like the front office dynamic is so healthy and the coach, front office dynamic is so healthy in Washington. And we talk about, oh, well, what's this person's job? What's that person's job? And sometimes those responsibilities, where typically this would be something where as a head coach, you would talk to a player, because there's a comfort and a respect and all these kinds of things and a collaboration between Quinn and Peters, it allows the personal relationships involved to take precedent, where I think Peters is actually better positioned to do this than Quinn. Not that DQ couldn't, not that DQ shouldn't, not that he wouldn't do a great job. But again, I just think the personal relationships here with Peters and that relationship that Dan and Adam have allows for the optimal outcome here without any hurt feelings between them or any weird dynamics on the team between team coaching staff or roster / players, front office coaching staff. Anything else we want to add, or is that enough Brandon Ayuk TikTok talk?
No, I think it's enough.
And that concludes Talk Talk. Hour number 2 of the Hoffman Show here on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And it's 5 o'clock, which means it is about time for Not My Beat. We'll tell you it's 6 o'clock. Excellent guest coming up. Not that our 5 o'clock guest is not, as we wait to bring him in here. But 6 o'clock, Ben Golliver from the Washington Post joins us from Las Vegas, where he watched Cooper Flagg go off yesterday against Team USA, the hopeful future Wizard, the presumed number 1 overall pick in next year's draft. Just how good is this kid? Golliver saw it with his own eyes. He's written a feature piece on him as well. So we will talk to Ben Golliver from the Washington Post coming up at 6 p.m. Right now, though, it is time for the day's top story, and thus it is time, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
We go to New York now, one of our Odyssey sister stations, WFAN in New York. We find Sean Mraz, although Mraz, you're actually not working. So thank you for some time live from your hammock on vacation to share your New York Giants rantings. Although maybe you should be thanking for me because, or maybe your wife should be thanking me because we know you're just going to rant about whatever Joe Schoen does on Hard Knocks anyway.
Yes, exactly. And you typical Washington fan. It's Joe Schoen. Get his name right. Have some respect.
Oh, yeah, that you know what? That's my bad. Joe Schoen, that's correct. Even though it's spelled like Schoen, it is pronounced Shane. So
I know.
My bad.
I wasn't going to let a commander station here call out Joe Schoen without his name right.
No, that's your job. So what'd you think of the first episode?
I will say this. I think it was really good TV. I'm really, really looking forward to the next couple episodes as well. I've talked to some people that have seen, I think, them all, if not everyone except the last one, and they said basically the best is yet to come. Here's the reason I think it's good. I think I'd be really interested and intrigued to watch going forward if this wasn't about a team that I get paid to talk about and a team that I grew up loving. So I think that NFL Films and Max, HBO, I think they've done a really good job here in trying to find a way to, of course, be pigs and expand, NFL talk and NFL revenue. That goes without saying. But everybody's gotten tired of the training camp version of Hard Knocks. I think this is really cool because I like the nerdy stuff about how a team is built from the end of the season on. And I think already in episode 1, despite the fact that the Giants, like all these other teams, have editorial control, I think we got a lot of really cool moments and a lot of really cool conversations that, like we know, Craig, all of us in sports radio can only talk about when moves have happened in the offseason. But seeing the dynamic between Shane, his owner, John Mara, some of his scouts and assistant personnel under him kind of talking about the Saquon Barkley stuff. I think this has all been really intriguing so far.
No, I totally agree with you from just like a purely television element, because I think those of us that have covered the league too, you hear about names and assistant GM, watch out for this guy, or you hear about how a certain relationship maybe impacts a transaction. And we see it with the Brian Burns trade. We see that the relationship between the guys in Carolina and Shane and his group in New York winds up mattering. The thing that I come away from the first episode with, though, Sean, is the seeming disconnect between Shane, the rest of his staff, and certainly what we ultimately know, because we're months ahead of where the episodes are, as the Eagles, and the value of Saquon Barkley. What did you make of the conversations between the Giants front office as they decided whether or not to re-sign their star running back, who we know ultimately signs with Philly?
Okay, so I think that this was, to me, the most concerning. I was going to say discerning. Concerning part of this whole thing, because a fear up here, Craig, in the New York area is that, does Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll truly have the flexibility to run a team they want to run? Because a lot of people don't give John Mara like that Jerry Jones treatment the way he should, but he's only really hired from within. Joe Schoen and Daboll was so far out of left field compared to what the Giants usually did in hiring circles. And you could tell John Mara loved Saquon Barkley, and the old guard that stuck around on his staff, including Tim McDonald, who's been around a while. Those guys love Saquon Barkley. And I think it was very clear from this episode, and of course where we got the end result, that ultimately Joe Schoen got to do the job he wanted, which was to let Saquon walk. But I mean, how clear do we need to see that the general manager does not value paying running backs high-end money? Some of his, close people with him believe that too, but the old guard loves the idea of, well, this is a franchise player. What's our identity going to be? And I almost wanted to throw the remote through the TV if I heard that one more time. What's the identity going to be? They scored 16 points per game with Saquon Barkley. If you get worse, you get worse. But I think we could trust that the GM understands that maybe building around the running back is the wrong plan. So I think that's obviously the most fascinating storyline from episode 1. And it's going to be very interesting to see how Joe Schoen ultimately wins this war that we know he does win. But it is wild to see a front office that split. And basically the split, if you pay close enough attention like we do up here, is guys who have been here pre-Schoen versus the guys that Schoen brought along. And I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, for sure. Sean Marash, of course, producer of the afternoon show, WFAN in New York, also hosts weekends and does all kinds of great stuff covering the Giants up there with us here on the Hoffman show. That's so interesting because I think when you watch it, if you don't have that background, you're almost like, man, Schoen looks kind of like an idiot here because you just have people questioning him constantly. But I think that perspective of who is questioning him and why he holds fast in the way he does and the background that isn't necessarily as given of like, well, what were they with Saquon Barkley is really fascinating. Is there any more of those kind of personnel dynamics as you watch the episode that really stick out to you as someone who knows and has a better bio and background on the players involved here?
Yeah, I think that it's very clear to me. Joe Schoen, I mean, I know this. John Mara's sons, by the way, are friends with Daniel Jones, so that's part of this too. I think that Daniel Jones, Saquon, what Dave Gettleman and the previous regime put together, I think that Joe Schoen was hired. They did not pick up Daniel Jones's option. They didn't give Saquon an extension right away, and they played out that year 2 years ago, which ultimately led to a playoff season. I think, to me, they took the job thinking, look, John, I know you love these guys. Look, we're going to build our own thing here. And then when they made the playoffs, it was almost like they punished themselves because it was able to have John Mara jump in and go, see, we need to make sure we franchise Saquon. We cannot lose him. Give Daniel Jones a contract. Look, see, Dave Gettleman was right all along. And I feel like Joe Schoen and to a lesser extent Brian Dable got very handcuffed by their playoff year. And I think that you could already tell that in this episode. Joe Schoen talks about last year's Saquon negotiations, taking a year off his life. Well, yeah, that's probably because he still didn't value him at the money he wanted. Saquon, as he put in quotes, would feel disrespected at low offers. And you have the owner breathing down his neck, telling him how much they need to keep him. So I just think all of that became clear. And I think that when you think of the Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley Giants, that is something that ownership wanted. They felt like they were proven right in the first year when Dable was the coach that coached these guys to the playoffs. And I think until Daniel Jones, who will probably be gone after this year, is off the team, and now that Saquon's off the team, Joe Schoen truly can't even fully run the operation the way he designed it or the way he thought it would be.
Yeah, I think the Jones conversation, to hear an NFL GM say out loud, like, we're paying this guy a lot of money, we need to figure out if he's worth it.
Right.
It's
that's the line of the show. We're not paying him $40 million to hand off to a $12 million running back. Now, Howie Roseman may disagree. But, yeah, I think that's almost like a shot at Mara. Hey, that's the way I read it, too, and maybe many didn't. Hey, remember when you wanted me to give Daniel Jones that $40 million? Well, guess what? Now we're not giving Saquon that $12 million. If you want to pay him $40 million, let's go see improvement here, John.
Right, totally. And I'm curious how, because I'm sure you guys on the show and on the shows up there over the course of the last week have taken calls on that. I'm curious how the fan base reacted to that as well, of kind of this almost ultimatum from the GM delivered via Hard Knocks to the quarterback of like, hey, dude, you better earn your money. Otherwise, we're gonna move on and find something else, considering it's been a bunch of rough years for the Giants outside of the playoff, surprise a couple of years ago. Is that a tolerance that fans have, or are they like, hell no, like you better figure out a way to win with what we got. And we don't, we don't want to see another year of Daniel Jones failing.
This is fascinating, Craig, because in many ways, the episode and the dynamic we're talking about between ownership and the old guard versus the, newest general manager is a lot like the fan base up here, because the fan base is extremely split, where I would say the older fan trusts and believes, hey, just get a good offensive line, which to a point they're probably right, but I think that ship sailed. And Daniel Jones and Saquon can operate. How are you going to run the ball without Saquon? And the younger Giant fan is like, enough is enough. I mean, we're watching all this run and gun, fun spread offenses in the NFL, and we are so archaic. So I think the vocal young fan watched this episode and I think almost negatively reacted to Joe Schoen when Joe Schoen said some positive things about Daniel Jones. Well, what's he supposed to say? The guy's the quarterback. He's on camera and everything. and I think freaked out that the Giants are going to be stuck here for the next couple of years and didn't pay close enough attention. Where I think the old fan heard some of this stuff and was like, see, everybody believes in Daniel Jones. So it's kind of weird. I think we have a very split fan base up here, but I think ultimately all it took me was 45 minutes to feel trust in Joe Shane and understand why when, he let Saquon walk, it's because he knows that, the team has too many holes to be paying a running back and not doing the running back by committee thing. And when it comes to quarterback, yeah, he's paying Daniel Jones, $40 million on average. But guess what? He also gave him essentially a 2-year deal. The Giants could get out of it this year. Probably for that reason, thinking Daniel Jones, wouldn't be able to continue to succeed even with the offensive line they had. So the Giants have a lot of problems, no doubt about it. They also have a lot more solutions than people think, no doubt about it. But the fan base is as split as the regime seemed to be in episode 1.
So I'm glad that you mentioned that. Sean Marash is our guest here from WFAN in New York. The idea that they have a ton of problems, but maybe more solutions than people realize. Because I'm sure you, like me, have been listening to a lot of these ranking episodes or reading articles, whatever, where, people that I like and respect are talking about our teams. And you're like, damn, y'all think we're going to be that bad?
Right.
And I think for Washington, obviously, you don't have a whole lot of ground to stand on. You won 4 games last year. A lot of people are not as high on Dan Quinn as I think a lot of us here in DC are, having gone through the spring with him. And then some of the issues that people see as like these fatal flaws, it's like, oh no, I think that they have potential solutions. So as you go through that same process with the Giants and you hear them ranked 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, 32nd, and all these rankings, do you agree with that? They're like, I just don't think they'll be able to overcome it. Or you're like, no, everyone's missing the point here. The Giants have a chance to surprise people.
Look, I do think the Giants have a chance to surprise people. By the way, I think the Commanders have a chance to surprise people as well. But I also don't blame people that go through rankings. What frustrates me more than anything, and this may shock you because I can laugh up a good time. I'm very good on like revision and then looking forward. A year ago, did anybody think the Green Bay Packers or Jordan Love were going to be a playoff team? Everybody pointed to a million problems, Aaron Rodgers leaving, et cetera, et cetera. And we could find cases like this in the NFL every single season. Geez, we all thought the Jaguars were going to run away in the South. So that's an NFL thing in general. But the Giants' first of all, the Giants talent-wise, I know there's a lot of people that are going to be very unknown. Joe Shane's turned over a lot of the roster. They have more talent 1 through 53 than they did 2 years ago when they were good enough to win 9 games. Last year, with 3 quarterbacks playing, they won 6 games, and I can give you 3-4 games off the top of my head that came down to basically one play. That's the story of the NFL, though. Everybody lives between 6 and 9 wins. And when you throw in the fact that there's a 7th playoff team in each conference, I think the Giants, by the way, I know this isn't about Washington, I think both these teams can absolutely surprise and make the playoffs. And I think that everybody looks at these position rankings, and it does make me scratch my head. The Giants just had a Malik Neighbors 6th overall, who, if he went anywhere else but the Giants, people would be drooling about hooking up with other quarterbacks. It's like the idea that, who's going to throw Malik Neighbors the ball? I know that this is hard for people to remember, but Daniel Jones did make the playoffs 2 years ago. So if he was healthy, that is possible. Defensively, though, I think that's where the Giants are going to surprise, man. Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Dexter Lawrence up front. A great inside linebacker duo with Bobby Okereke, who should have been a Pro Bowler last year, along with Micah McFadden. And a secondary where Tay Banks out of Maryland down there, he emerged last year as a first round pick, and he's going to be the number 1 corner, and they're pretty deep with a lot of good young talent. I think the Giants are going to have a top half of the league defense, and it's very curious if the offensive line guys they've added in free agency, John Runyon Jr., et cetera, gel enough. But I think the Giants are going to be right in the middle there where people think 28th, 29th. This is not a 4-win type football team. I think that would be a catastrophic disaster if it was. I think they're going to be sitting there right there in the hunt graphic come the first week of December in the wild card, because most teams are anyway, and that's where they're going to live.
Yeah, no, I think the Giants and Commanders are both pretty fascinating in mirrored ways that you talked about. Like, these two teams have pretty good front sevens. I think the Giants might overall be better because I think their D-line has more more across the board.
Craig, think about that. Burns, Thibodeau, and Dexter Lawrence getting after you. I know Washington has good D-line. That is pretty damn up there.
No, I think in a league full of stacked D-lines, like we did our positional group rankings on Take Command, and I think we put the Giants D-line first. And the Eagles D-line is nasty. The Commanders have 2 Pro Bowlers in the middle, and Dallas has Micah freaking Parsons. And I think we put the Giants first. And like you said, their linebacker core, I think I'd probably slightly take Washington's over, but like they might also be 2 of the best 5 in the league. And I think there's real questions for both secondaries. Obviously, offensively, there's a wild outcome of possibilities. But that, you said, like, this is the NFL. Like, that's kind of I can look at almost every team in the league and make an argument for how it could all go wrong with one or two injuries, and also how if they stay healthy and a couple guys develop, then they could be messing around for a playoff spot.
Of course, and nobody's calling it a Super Bowl team. I'm not calling the Giants an NFC championship team, but I'm sorry if the head coach and a better roster than they had 2 years ago that won 9 games and made the playoffs, if I'm not counting them out in July.
Yeah, which is the beauty of the NFL and why it is king and why we spend most of our time talking about it. Sean Marash, every day in the afternoons, producing that fine radio program up on WFAN in New York. You can also catch him weekends. He's on doing the national stuff. Basically, you just download the Odyssey app and flip it on, and somewhere in there, Sean's talking about stuff.
Yeah, and one more plug. If you are interested in Hard Knocks, watching it every week, my podcast, One Giant Step 3 on the Odyssey app, I'm going to be doing recap episodes after every single episode of Hard Knocks, treating it like some of the best TV reaction podcasts you have, as opposed to a football reaction podcast.
Love it.
That's why we're doing this for the month.
How's my guy Bryce doing? Is the kid hanging in there?
Bryce is good, man. Bryce, I can't believe I'm saying this as I'm, approaching my late 30s. Bryce has become my voice of the young Giant fan on the podcast. So Bryce is great. Bryce is great.
Yeah, another fine Syracuse alum. We're everywhere. You can't escape.
Yeah.
DA left, Sean, but you replaced him with another orange.
Craig, and I could always tell when somebody I'm working with is from Syracuse. You know how? They tell you.
It's fair enough. As me and my producer sit here as 2 Syracuse alums having this conversation with you. Sean, always appreciate it. Thank you, sir.
All right. Take care, Craig.
All right. That is Sean Mraz from WFAN in New York with us here on the Hoffman Show. I want to quickly follow up on what we talked about at the end there. Are the Commanders or the Giants the 2 teams at the bottom of everyone's power rankings most likely to actually have a good year? Let's dive into that for a few minutes next on the Hoffman Show.
Today's top.
It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And our off-season NFL coverage is presented by T-Mobile. Switch to T-Mobile and you can get tons of benefits and still save on every plan versus AT&T and Verizon. Use their savings calculator to find out how much at T-Mobile.com/switch. So off-season coverage for the NFL is, hey, here's everybody's power rankings. Do we hate them or do we like them? But here's a different question I want to ask, Anthony, is which of the following teams in the bottom, let's call it 8, of the consensus NFL power rankings do we think has the best shot to actually be good? So Colts Wire, the USA Today site that covers the Colts, decided to tabulate everybody's power rankings. So he looked at 6 recent power rankings from the NFL.com, ESPN, PFF, CBS Sports, Sharp Football, and Pro Football Talk, and then made like an average. So the teams we're going to consider here include the Giants, who we just talked about, Mraz, and the hometown Commanders. At 32 was the Panthers, 31 was the Patriots, 30th was the Giants, 29th was the Broncos, 28th was the Commanders, 27 Cardinals, 26 Titans, 25 Saints. So of those teams, who do you think has the best shot to actually be good?
I would say the Cardinals, to be honest. Or do I get like more than one team?
I think the 3 teams that I would consider are the Cardinals, the Commanders, and the Giants. Like, I actually think those 3 are the right answers. So here's why I think the other ones are not, right? The Titans, I guess the Titans I would throw in there just because I think Brian Callahan's really talented as a coordinator and as a head coach, and I think he'll be a good head coach. I think that they'll lean into the right things, whatever their strengths are. But this year, I think for them is also we got to find out if Will Levis is good. And I don't think Will Levis is going to be so good that even with the receivers that they brought in, et cetera, that they'll be really, really excellent. They're in a tough division. Like, the Jags are pretty solid. The Colts are pretty solid. The Texans look like they might be one of the best teams in the AFC. So I think that's a factor here. I think the Titans could be spunky. They'd probably be next for me on this list, which makes sense because they're the highest team we're going to consider here at the composite ranking of 26. But that's why I'm kind of out on the Titans. Is it's too much of a Will Levis experiment.
I 100% agree. And to be honest, shipping out Derrick Henry, he made things a little bit easier because you could lean on a guy like him. And not to say, Tajay Spears can't handle that workload, but Derrick Henry is a different beast. So, again, if Will Levis is the guy you're trusting in, I feel bad for you.
I think the other thing that makes me positive on the Titans, to the extent of, like, we're trying to be benevolent here, is Bill comes along with Brian, obviously, and his ability to coach up an O-line. How quickly can they get that O-line to be really, really good? In which case, that's a game changer for Levis. It's a game changer for Spears. It's a game changer for the entire team. So I think that's a fun one. So we'll come back to the Cardinals, the Giants, and the Commanders in a second. The Broncos, like, we're really doing the Bo Nix thing? Is he just going to start? And does he have a really good line to protect him? No. Does he have great skill position players? Like, Cortland Sutton's the best they got. And Cortland Sutton's a good NFL player, but, like, everyone's got good players. And then defensively, once you get past Surtain, like, I don't know how much talent they have on that side of the ball anymore either. I just think it's a bad roster, which they're in for a long-haul rebuild, and it almost got set back because there was only so much they could do. Like, they had to figure out whether they could do it with Russell. They figured out that Sean Payton and Russell Wilson hate each other. And now Sean Payton is kind of in year 0 of a rebuild. So I don't know if there's much we need to add for the Broncos there.
I think you said everything that needed to be said.
All right, the Patriots' best shot to be annoying is their defense is better than you realize. But I don't think it's elite. It has the potential to be elite in the way that we're going to talk about with a couple of other teams here. And then Brissett plays the entire season for them and is a workable quarterback. But their line is really not good, and their skill position, unless someone emerges in a way that we just tremendously do not expect, their skill position players are not any good either. I also don't trust their coaching staff. So the Patriots, I don't have a lot of good things to say about.
I think that's why they're, at the bottom of this list.
I think that's true. And then the only team below them is the Carolina Panthers, who are still, like, they had a decent defense last year. And then they traded away Brian Burns and Frankie Louvu and Jeremy Chin, who was hurt most of the year, in fairness to Carolina, they came here. So the defense that was okay is now not okay. And offensively, I don't think they have a lot going for them at all. I think their line will be better. I'd imagine Bryce Young is better, but they still are so lacking at the skill positions that there's a reason they're 32. I would be stunned if Carolina is more than a 6-win football team.
Man, I feel bad for Bryce Young, man.
I do too.
I do
too. Okay, so why do we think the Giants, the Cardinals, and the Commanders could be good? Well, no, we can do this quickly, and then we can, or should we save this for next?
I think we should do it next.
Okay. Why do those three teams stand out as the bottom of the barrel teams in terms of power rankings, consensus, that we actually think have a chance, if certain things go right, to be good? We'll explain why it seems that Anthony and I agree on this next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show, Team 980, halfway point. You can also listen to us on the free Odyssey app, which is cool because it's free and it's easy and it works well. And you can even use it with Apple CarPlay. You can just be like, hey, Siri, play the Team 980 on the Odyssey app. And it'll be like, okie dokie. And it'll be right there on your CarPlay. Anthony, do you have CarPlay in your car?
I do indeed.
As do I. I didn't have it for a long time. I somehow kept getting cars that did not have CarPlay. And then I'd go on road trips, and I'd rent a car. I'd be like, this is great.
Yeah.
And then finally, I was like, just makes life easier. If you got Android Play, that's fine too. We got the Odyssey app there. So just download it. Again, it's free. It's not one of those apps where you're like, yeah, everyone told me this app was awesome. $4.99. No, we don't play that game. Anyway, we're talking about teams that many people think are going to be, but actually have a chance to be kind of good. Now, kind of good is relative, and I also think it's worth pointing out before we dive into this exercise and the are you serious part of this exercise. We're not saying these teams are actually going to be good. It's just like there's a path there. And this is the beauty of the NFL is for like 28 teams, 29 teams, for not the Panthers, there's a path. There's a path even for the New England Patriots to be competitive this year. If defensively they come out and they're just solid and Jacoby Brissett manages games, is there a chance that in December, to use the phrasing and the example that Mraz used with us in Not My Beat when talking about his beloved Giants. Is there a chance that in the first week of December, in that little in the hunt graphic, somewhere on the right in the playoff picture, that the New England Patriots are floating around at 6-7? Yeah. It probably means that Drake May hasn't played at all, which might cause some problems in the future. Jacoby Brissett, we know what he can do. Can he keep them competitive? Sure. Carolina, they got tough sledding, bro, because they're bad. Their roster's terrible. But we said that about Arizona last year. And that brings us to Arizona. I like the Commanders and Giants' chances of being legitimately competitive more. But part of that is the division that Arizona plays in. They got 3 playoff teams in that division. They got the Seahawks, who, again, we'll see if Geno can have another good year, what the fit is with the new OC. The kind of stuff they ran at UW, where he's taking this across town and trying it in the NFL. A lot of deeper throws down the field where Geno is excellent. Obviously, their wide receiver core is tremendous. They're super physical in the secondary, and they have some interesting pieces. And, like, how does Mike McDonald use them in his first year as a head coach? So Seattle's super interesting, but they're talented. LA's LA. Sean is as brilliant as it gets. Stafford, when healthy, is still a top 10 quarterback in the league. Puka is sick. Kupp is still good. And then they have a zillion questions defensively, but last year they really did a good job and figured some things out. Now, can they do it without Aaron Donald? We'll see, but, we'll see. And then the Niners are the Niners. Barring them just collapsing due to injury because they play so physical and they've played so many games over the last couple of years, I think San Francisco's still the team to beat in the NFC, if not the entire NFL. So Arizona's got tough sledding. But the path to them being good is defensively, they were a pain in the butt to play last year. Gannon's excellent. He's so good as a coordinator. And he is helping shape that unit. He knows what he likes. He has got more players. They have a bunch of young talent. And then offensively, they were poopy last year because they knew they had to kind of wait on Kyler. The quarterback play was mediocre to bad. And they also just didn't have the weapons offensively. Well, they added someone who might be the best rookie receiver we've seen in a long time in terms of impact in Marvin Harrison Jr. Obviously, if he goes out and matches what Puka did from a production standpoint this year, that would be insane. But he could easily be a 1,200-yard receiver with 12 touchdowns as a rookie. Like, he's sick. And if he and Kyler click and they figure out offensively the ways to protect Kyler, the Cardinals could go from 28th in everyone's power rankings to in the hunt, middle of the pack, maybe even a 10-win football team if everything goes right and there's injuries and or regression elsewhere in the division, and some of those other teams they get a chance to play multiple times a year aren't very good. That's my Arizona spiel.
I mean, I agree with you. And the defense, which you just pointed out, that's what I was going to more so like lean on because, again, the Cardinals were in a decent amount of games last year. It just they couldn't score, but you bring in Kyler, you found a little gem in Michael Wilson. Then you bring in Marvin Harrison Jr. You also have Trey McBride. Like, there are pieces on that offensive side of the ball, and like we got to see those pieces flash. But now you add in Kyler Murray, I think they can actually do something and be a little electric, and maybe that's going to be the difference in the games in terms of a game where you're down 3 and now you end up winning by 3 or something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean, second year for Paris Johnson as well. Like,
Yep.
So the line gets a little bit better. Kyler the whole year, second year in the system with Drew Petzing, who a lot of people like as an OC. So, like, there's a lot to like there where you go. Definitely Arizona's on the right track, but could it pop this year if Kyler is healthy and looks awesome? Yes. There's also a chance that Kyler's not that good in this system, that it doesn't work. He gets hurt again, a couple other injuries on defense, and they're absolutely where everyone thinks they are. Then I think Washington and New York are super interesting because their formula is very similar. Very, very similar. They have 2 of the 10 best front sevens in the league, right? Washington, solid through the middle. Payne and Allen, maybe the best duo in the league. Obviously, they didn't play like that last year, but there's a chance, right? This is the optimist view. Their linebacker core has been rated by Mike Clay at ESPN and others as the best linebacking core in the league with Wagner and Luvu. Now, the thing that's missing is the edge rush piece. Well, Luvu will be a part of that. What if Jamin's good out there? What if, Dorrance Armstrong in a full-time role is like actually a 10-sack guy? So there's a path to get some pass rush there without having to do anything super crazy other than get better production than we expect out of the personnel from a guy in Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., guys in Dan Quinn and Joe Witt Jr., who have been very good at that. The big question defensively is the secondary. The secondary was coached as poorly as I've ever seen a secondary coach last year, but there's definite talent there, and if they figure it out, well, now the defense as a whole is pretty darn good, and offensively, you have a gigantic wild card and a rookie quarterback, and you need the offensive line thing to situate out right well as well. But that's the path, right? Is the quarterback is better than people realize right now. You lean into the running game and your defense, and the same exact thing is true for the Giants. The Giants' front seven is gross, dude. Their linebackers are nasty, and their defensive line might be the best in football. And so if all of a sudden you've got Thibodeau, who's more consistent as he continues to progress in his career, and he makes a leap, and he's playing like he played against the Commanders, not every week, but way more weeks than he has been. Dexter Lawrence might be the best D lineman now that Aaron Donald's retired in the whole league. And then who do they have on the other side? Who am I missing?
Ojulari. And,
yeah, Ojulari.
There's another one that they have.
Oh, they just traded for Brian Burns.
Oh, yeah.
That's who I'm forgetting. Yeah, they just traded for Brian freaking Burns, who's like a 15-sack guy. So defensively, the reason that I say the Giants could be good, not that I'm predicting it, I'm actually predicting them to be bad, but the reason I didn't scoff at Mraz when he brought it up and why I do think it's totally fair to bring it up is defensively, if Deonte Banks is a stud at corner and some of their young players in the secondary pan out, they could be really good defensively. And then they just need Daniel Jones to be the Daniel Jones he was 2 years ago, maybe a little bit better. And then Malik Neighbors could be a stud. Like if Neighbors is a stud and you have a play-action passing game and Jones is leveraging his running abilities and that helps out your run game with Singletary, who's a good back, like the Giants could have a workable offense, a nasty defense, and be terrible to play every single week and win a bunch of games. Because Daboll's and Kafka are really good offensive play callers and designers. So to me, that's the thing is like for Arizona, for Washington, and New York, there's huge questions at quarterback with a wide range of possibilities. There are skill players with mega upside that we don't know about, specifically in Arizona and New York with Neighbors and Harrison, and defenses that could be certainly top half units, if not, if everything goes right, top 10 units in the entire league. And that's a hard team to say that is going to be the 27th or 28th best team in the league, yet that's where they are in everyone's power rankings.
And which team between the Commanders and the Giants would you give a little bit of an edge, I guess? Or who would be your front runner if you had to rank everybody? And we know the Panthers are last, but who will be at the top?
Well, I think the Commanders-Giants question is easy. I'd rather be the Commanders with the upside potential of Jaden.
Okay.
Right? I would rather have that swing. And who do I think is better? Like, who is more likely to be the team that is surprisingly good, I think it's Washington. Because I don't think Jones, like I'm scared about Jones coming off the ACL. He was bad before he got it last year, and a guy who relies a ton on the running game and on his own running game coming off an ACL doesn't make me feel warm and fuzzy inside.
Nah, I would agree. I do love the Giants defense though. It's sort of kind of giving shades of when they had Strahan, Tuck, you're like, good gracious, like you just rotating all these good defensive linemen. So that's what it gives shades of. We'll see what actually happens when they get on the field. And you also talked about their linebackers as well. It's just that front seven it can make some noise. And we've seen what a front seven can do with Dallas and things of that nature. You know, you just got to be able to mirror the pass rush and, you know, the blitzing with the back end coverage. So we'll see.
For sure. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Ben Golliver live from Vegas at 6 p.m. from USA Basketball Training Camp. We'll talk to him about Anthony Edwards' comments and just how good was Cooper Flagg yesterday. He was there in that scrimmage when the presumptive number one pick in 2025 went off against Team USA. He was cooking Anthony Davis. Maybe he's the best defender in the whole NBA, and he's 17 years old. So we'll get some more insight from Golliver coming up at 6 p.m. Coming up next, though, this, that, the other thing moves from around the NBA this weekend that we get a chance to talk about yesterday, including DeMar DeRozan going to Sacramento. Love it? Hate it? Talk about it next on the Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. Of course, if you miss any part of the show, you can always check out the Hoffman Show podcast. Just search the Hoffman Show in your favorite podcast app, and it's the show for you anytime, anywhere, on demand, on your schedule. Right now, it's time for a segment we like to call This, That, and the Other Thing. There is a ton of stories that wind up coming out in the wide old world of sports that, they're important, but not necessarily a full segment important. So we want to have the chance to talk about them and then just move on to something else. So a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and then a little bit of the other things. We start off in the weekend in the NBA. A couple of moves that were made that we have not had a chance to talk about yet. The biggest one being the Sacramento Kings trading for DeMar DeRozan. Not the biggest thing that happened to DeMar DeRozan this weekend, though, Anthony. When did you see the Not Like Us video?
I still have not watched it.
Really?
Apparently, it got 15 million views the first day. I was not a part of it.
We were within the first 15 million views.
Oh, wow. I wasn't.
Yeah, it had been out for like an hour maybe, and it had over 1 million views when we watched it. Like well over 1 million views.
Yeah, I still haven't watched it.
All of a sudden, we're kind of scrolling our phones, and it was like, oh, we need to pause the thing that we're watching on our television, and we need to go to YouTube right now and watch this video.
Yeah.
I'll just say Kendrick Lamar releasing that song on Juneteenth and the video on July 4th was one of many choices he made.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It came out on July 4th.
It sure did. You're not a colleague. You're
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, if you're not up on the Drake Kendrick Lamar rap beef, go ahead, lose your night on the internet. It's a fun one. But anyway, DeMar DeRozan is in the video. And, of course, the former Raptor, which Drake is I think, celebrity part owner of, but certainly a courtside fixture. Basically, Kendrick Lamar was like, you all didn't deserve him anyway. And then he comes home to California, not with the hometown Lakers or Clippers. I guess really at this point, hometown Clippers, because I think DeMar is from Compton, which is where, or not far from Inglewood, where the Clippers' new facility and home base will be, the Intuit Dome. But the Sacramento Kings land DeRozan, and the Kings were in, they were in the play-in game last year, or the play-in series, if you will. They were the 9 seed. They come off being the 3 seed the year before, and like DeRozan's a fantastic player. I just think he's a really interesting fit with that crew because it's a lot of non-shooters on the floor. Like, Sabonis isn't a 3-point shooter. DeRozan's not a 3-point shooter. De'Aaron Fox has become a pretty good 3-point shooter, but, like, he'd rather drive it as well. And so, especially as they apparently are exploring trades involving Kevin Huerter, including for Kyle Kuzma, there'd be picks and stuff in that trade as well. It's not like, hey, DC, we're giving you a Maryland Terrapin. You have to give us whatever we want. No, there'd be picks and stuff, possibly, hopefully multiple, coming back with Huerter from Sacramento. But especially as they look to potentially trade one of their best shooters, like, it's a really interesting decision to kind of zig when other teams are zagging. And it worked for the Kings a couple of years ago, but clearly they backslid a little bit last year, in part because of health. But certainly an interesting choice with the 35, I believe, year-old DeRozan coming in to supplement De'Aaron Fox.
Yeah, I still quite don't understand this move, to be honest. It doesn't really move the needle too much in a packed West. And, like, to the point that you were making, I think them not having, 3-pointers if you're going to ship off a Kevin Huerter. Yes, you still have Keegan Murray, but you need more, like, in today's NBA. And DeRozan, yes, he's the king of the twos, but we need threes, brother man. Hey, Siri.
Is that Siri over on you, or am I getting an ad somewhere?
Oh, that was Siri over here.
Nope, it was an ad on my computer.
Oh.
Well, Siri, what do you think Siri was trying to tell you?
I don't know. Siri popped up over here, though.
Oh, Siri just popped up over me. I think, well, now, because they've eliminated, you don't have to say, hey, Siri anymore.
Oh, you can just say,
Siri, are you paying attention?
I don't think they were.
It said okay on my screen. It just didn't. Now you're silent. Whatever. The point is, I don't really get the fit with DeMar DeRozan in Sacramento either, but I also kind of respect the addition of the talent, and we'll see where it goes. All right, that was this. What do we got for that, Anthony? There was another big NBA story.
Yeah, that Paul George, he said on his podcast that he spoke with Kawhi Leonard before choosing to sign with Philly, and I was more so just thinking, like, should Kevin Durant have done something like that to Russell Westbrook? Because they had a huge falling out after that, and it was, I don't know.
It does seem like
That's his guy.
Something that you should probably do. Like, hey, like, because I think Russ, like, understood, right? Hey, you're making your decision, it's business, whatever. But when you go through that many battles with the dude and you're the face of the franchise together and you're supposedly really good friends, like, I don't want someone hearing about it from – just think about if you made a big decision in your life.
Yeah.
Would you call – let's say you chose to – like, you got a great offer somewhere and you chose to leave the show.
Yeah.
You would call me. I wouldn't find out when you just didn't show up for work.
Yeah, that would be messed up.
Or, like, when you put it on social media.
Yeah.
You wouldn't be like, oh, my God, it's an amazing opportunity. Like, you'd shoot me a text, be like, hey, buddy, I got this amazing whatever. And I would do the same to you.
Yeah.
You'd be the first non-family, non-boss to know.
Yeah.
Like, everyone who needs to know for actually, I would count you as a need to know because that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And I would say the same thing, coming back this way for you. But, like, yeah, that's kind of the thing is, like, I would imagine that you probably say something. What I thought was interesting from the PG pod, though, is, like, he wanted the same deal as Kawhi. And I don't get why Paul George thinks that he belongs on the same I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask, right?
Yeah.
This is like the people who are, like, mad at LeBron for asking for money and for his kid to get whatever Bronny got. And it's like, you realize that it'd be stupid not to ask, and the Lakers can just say no, right? Like, be mad at the Lakers, not at the guy asking for money.
Exactly.
That's what all of us would do. Even if we were rich, we'd ask for money because that's how it works. But if PG was like, nah, maybe he knew that he'd get it somewhere else in free agency. So he's like, look, if you want to give me that deal, like, I'll take it. But I do think it's a bit of a wacky bit that PG, maybe he's like, I'm more reliable, even if Kawhi is the A player. I don't know. Paul George is an interesting basketball player because, like, as Brian Windhorst said, like, we've now had how many different summers of Paul George, and he's got how many conference finals appearances?
None.
But he's obviously excellent. He's obviously a tremendous player, but he's not good enough to carry a franchise.
Yeah.
And that becomes a weird place where, like, Kawhi is, but Kawhi is not reliable.
And it's crazy, though, because Kawhi, I would say, is our, like, prototypical player. Like, he's 6'8". He can shoot. He can handle. Like, these are the things you need to be able to succeed in today's NBA. And for some reason, he just doesn't result to winning.
Yeah, like, the thing is about every player is being able to be great once or twice a week is not good enough. In the NBA, if you want to be a great player, you got to be great 4 times a week or 5 times a week in some weeks. They really load up that schedule. That's this, that's that. The other thing, real quick, we'll mention this. We might try to take some calls on this tomorrow. The Commanders have announced that the gold pants are returning. Hey, now.
Let's go.
As a longtime fan, Anthony, how do you feel about this?
Good, because I feel like the colors that we have now, we sort of kind of got away from, what made us the real burgundy.
The burgundy and gold, the gold part of the burgundy and gold. Yeah. I mean, look.
Not that off-white and off-cream, and I don't even know what they were doing. Black and yellow, like,
black one, look.
The black is cool. It is cool.
Here's the thing. I like the black uniforms. I also get why people hate them. Because they're not burgundy and gold. And it's like, if we're going to be the burgundy and gold, let's be the burgundy and gold and not do what the NBA does where you flip on a game and you have no idea who's playing. I don't think that makes me an old guy screaming at a cloud. It makes me someone who's like, hey, the whole point of a uniform is it's uniform. That you tune in and you actually know who is playing. That you have brand value. Stupid. But the jerseys are cool. Not really. They're just like Nike just put a random color simulator on. What are we doing? Now, I was of the opinion that a couple years ago, and I would still be of the opinion, if they want to do a full rebrand, or when they changed the name a couple years ago, if they wanted to change the colors and be like, we're just starting over, considering what the last 25 years have been, I would support that. I know a lot of longtime fans that is sacrilege, and now they hate me forever. But if you're going to that point, if you're going to do burgundy and gold, do burgundy and gold.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you.
So, like, if you want to start over, start over. If you don't, and you want to embrace go past 25 years, embrace the 90 years, many of which is tremendously successful history, then do it properly. Just don't. What's the lesson, Anthony? We don't split the baby. No baby splitting.
No.
That's what you learned in whatever biblical school you went to, no matter your faith. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back to Vegas, we go. Ben Golliver is at Team USA training camp, and he's got eyes on Cooper Flagg. So do the Wizards. So does everyone else in the NBA. Just how good is this kid? Golliver tells us next. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Of course, we are streaming live on YouTube as well at the Team 980. It's our pleasure to welcome to the show, I believe for the first time, Ben Golliver from the Washington Post, covers the NBA. He's out in Las Vegas for Team USA's training camp, and then ultimately Summer League will make its way out there as well. Ben, thanks for your time, man. Appreciate it, and welcome to the show.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Glad to be here.
So yesterday, all of a sudden, the entire basketball world went, oh, okay, this Cooper Flagg kid, we knew he was good, but wow, he puts up big numbers in the scrimmage and is making plays all over the place against Team USA. For those that don't know, Flagg, the projected #1 pick in 2025, which may or may not be relevant to the hometown Wizards here, of course. But you were there, like, to try to describe what happened yesterday. How would you describe Cooper Flagg and kind of the wowness of him leading the USA select team down to a wire? You know, the Team USA ultimately wins this scrimmage, but it is incredibly close, thanks in large part to Flagg.
No, that's right. And I would say it's incredibly relevant for these Washington Wizards because they should be playing capture the flag next season, no doubt about it. I mean, it looks like they're headed that direction, kind of going into tank mode, developmental mode with these young players. And that's what you should do. I mean, to me, Cooper Flagg is probably the best American prospect we've seen since Kevin Durant. I think he's on that level in terms of his all-around game, his two-way impact, his polish. And really what you saw in this scrimmage, I mean, typically not one player is going to dominate these scrimmages because there's so much talent on the court. And the media was only let in really for about the last half an hour, so we didn't get the full scope of the game. But as soon as they opened the doors, it was just a Cooper Flagg takeover. I mean, he's just banging off the dribble threes over the top of Anthony Davis. I mean, the Lakers center, he's probably the best defensive player in the NBA, or right up there with like Victor Wembanyama. He's backing down Drew Holiday, who was just playing defense in the finals against Luka Doncic and hitting turnarounds over Drew Holiday. He's flying up the court, leaping over Miami Heat center Bam Adebayo. He's played in a couple finals to get a tough and one finish in the paint. He's dribbling the ball up the court, showing off his handle. He's guarding guards on the perimeter, showing his quick feet. He's a really, really intelligent basketball player, super high IQ. And then on top of everything, he just plays harder than just about everyone because his motor is just always on 11. That's just how he plays. So maybe he's not as natural of a scorer as Kevin Durant. Maybe he's not as good of a virtuoso playmaker as like a LeBron James when he was a teenager. But Cooper just makes winning plays time and time and time again. And he got that select team, the junior varsity team, back into that game. And, there was people who were, kind of on the sideline screaming for Cooper to get the ball in the last play because they wanted to see if he could hit the game winner, but it didn't go that way. But still, everybody left kind of impressed and wowed that a guy who's 17 years old, who's going against a dream team that's full of 12 NBA All-Stars, probably at least 10 future Hall of Famers, wound up being the talk of the camp. It was stunning. You saw LeBron afterwards come over and give him a little pat on the butt. It was kind of like a congratulatory moment. And, LeBron knows a teenage phenom when he sees one, and that was the passing of the torch type moment between those two guys at yesterday's scrimmage.
Yeah, I'm so curious the reaction of those type of guys because, often it's funny because we talked about this in very different ways with the W this year and the influx of that rookie class and the talent there. But in the NBA, there's a little bit of that too. Like, all right, rookie, like you can be good, but I'm going to show you. And then with Wemby, everyone was like, yeah, we're going to try our best while we can, but we know this dude's going to be the best player on the planet sooner rather than later. And was there kind of that acknowledgement that Flagg is, to quote the kids, Ben, that Flagg is him already at this point, and that, well, yes, he'll have a transition period, and yes, it will take a while for him to reach the peak of his powers, that this is a kid that is already one of the, 30 best basketball players on the planet, even though he's a year from getting drafted?
Well, he's definitely him. There's no question. He's the next one up. And I think, the NBA culture is a little bit different than the WNBA culture, especially when it comes to USA basketball, because I think they're trying to set up these next generations, right? So USA basketball brings in an Anthony Edwards at age 22 as the youngest guy on the team, in part because they're thinking, 4 years down the road, 8 years down the road, Anthony Edwards might be the face of the team, sort of like LeBron and Kevin Durant and Steph Curry are right now. So they're trying to set up this lineage, right? And USA Basketball is also probably thinking, hey, there's a FIBA World Cup tournament in 2027. It sure would be awesome if Cooper Flagg, when he's 20 years old and he's already in the NBA for a couple of years, it sure would be nice if he was on that team, kind of leading that team potentially to gold. So it's a very welcoming atmosphere. Now, that doesn't mean they're not going to go at him and test him a little bit. And you see some of those one-on-one moments but I don't think it's malicious in any way. And Cooper told me after the scrimmage, he's like, look, these guys are just telling me to stay level-headed, keep grinding, and keep putting in the work. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And that's pretty standard advice from, older players to young players. But it's evidence that they care about his future as opposed to trying to go out there and show him up as a teenager, right? So I think it was a win-win-win all around. Not only did Cooper Flagg really get to go viral on social media and introduce his game to a whole lot of players, not only did he earn the respect from the elder statesmen, but those guys were able to show that they care about their sport. They're good ambassadors for basketball and for this USA basketball program and for the program itself, where they're always trying to recruit guys. And some years it's easier to recruit than others. I mean, everybody wants to go to Paris, right? Maybe not everybody wants to go to some of these World Cup tournaments halfway across the world, and to kind of give Cooper a great taste of this experience and keep him involved with the program going forward. It's a big win for a guy like Grant Hill, who's the new managing director, and also Steve Kerr, who's the coach.
Ben Golliver, Washington Post, with us here on the Hoffman Show. When we talk about Flagg and his NBA prospects, we know that this is going to be a loaded draft in 2025, and as long as the Wizards can stay in the top 5, they'll get a great prospect of some variety. But how different is Flagg compared to Ace Bailey and the rest of this class?
Well, I saw both those guys play at the Hoop Summit back in March and April up in Portland, Oregon, and I just thought Cooper was much more polished, much more NBA ready at this point than Ace Bailey. Ace Bailey's got a lot of potential, and with Cooper, it's reality. Like, he's ready to make impact winning at a very high level. I expect Duke to be a really, really, really good team. I expect him to be a huge part of that Duke team during his freshman season, and that's what separates him from everybody else in his class. I did this story on him a few months ago, and the key takeaway to me is his ambition. He's so talented. He's had that talent ever since he was like 11, 12 years old. And at every step of his journey, he's always sought out tougher competition to test himself. So he's playing in small-town Maine as a freshman. He wins a state championship. So rather than staying in Maine and just doing that 4 times and being like the biggest hero of Maine, he immediately transfers to Montverde Academy, which is, kind of the new Oak Hill in terms of, the best premier national basketball programs in the country. He goes to Montverde, immediately has a big impact there, continues to develop his game. He's playing against future college players in practice every single day, and he decides heading into his junior season, I'm going to reclassify. I'm going to skip a grade because I want to get to college faster and get to the NBA faster because I want tougher competition. So he leads Montverde to an undefeated season last year, a national championship, and he graduates high school in 3 years instead of 4. So now he's 17 years old going to Duke, and when it comes time to choose the program that he wants to go to, he says, I don't care if everybody's going to look at me as kind of like the quote-unquote next white Duke villain. I want to go and play for the most prestigious program on the biggest stage. I want all the pressure. I want the Cameron Crazies cheering for me. And this USA basketball camp's another example. They never take guys this young in this camp to play on the select team, right? Usually it's NBA players. All of his teammates were pretty much NBA players or free agents. And then occasionally they've brought in like 3rd or 4th year college guys for this program. And so for Cooper to be even just invited to this camp, it's another example of his ambition and how far ahead of the curve he is. And so I think that's why if you're a team like the Washington Wizards, Cooper is the kind of foundational player you need. If you're trying to build a winning culture, if you want a leader on the court, if you want somebody who's going to be all about basketball and no nonsense, that's going to be Cooper Flagg. And I think that's what's got the GM so excited about him.
Ben Golliver, Washington Post, with us from Las Vegas. USA basketball camp ongoing as they prepare for the 2024 Paris Olympics. Get back to the Wizards in a second, Ben, but the other big story that comes out of USA camp is the comments that I'm sure you had to be there for by Anthony Edwards, where he's like, everyone's going to have to fit in around me. I'm the number one option. How did that play in the room, and how has that been received generally? And also, is there some part of him that's correct in that analysis?
No, definitely not. I mean, on this particular team, he's not going to be the number one option, not even close to it. This is going to be a veteran-dominated USA basketball dream team. LeBron is going to be the central force. I mean, during these practices, he's sort of the alpha on the court. Steph Curry is chasing his first Olympics, so he's going to play a lot of minutes. And then Kevin Durant's going for a record 4th gold medal. So those are going to be kind of the headliner players. And they're also leaning a lot on Joel Embiid, who hasn't played for USA basketball before, but really addresses a problem they've had in some previous tournaments where they just haven't been big enough inside. They got bullied at last year's FIBA World Cup. They don't want that to happen again. They had a pretty small team at the Tokyo Olympics as well, and they potentially have to match up with Nikola Jokic or Wembanyama or Rudy Gobert during this summer's Olympics. So they want to be big and bulky and have a front line that can really do some damage. So I don't really see Anthony Edwards as being a top priority on this year's group like he was last year, where he sort of emerged as the leading scorer for that FIBA World Cup team. But it speaks to his innate confidence. It speaks to his swagger. I think his tongue was a little bit in cheek when he answered that question. He likes to play to the crowd. He likes to make people laugh. He's kind of got that goofy side to him. And so I think that was kind of how he delivered those comments. In response to other questions, he made it clear he thinks Kevin Durant's going to be the alpha in fourth quarter moments. And he also said, look, he wanted to be on this team because he wanted to get an up close and personal view of watching Kevin Durant on the Olympic stage, because that's who he grew up, kind of idolizing as his favorite player. So this is a great learning opportunity for Edwards. He's only 22. He's by far the youngest guy on the team. And I think USA Basketball is hoping he could be the face of that LA Olympic team, because this could very well be the last dance for LeBron, Steph, and KD on the international stage.
You'd have to think so, but then that'd have to be us accepting that LeBron James is being and not a cyborg. And I don't know that I'm ready to accept that yet. Last thing for you, Ben, the biggest story, of course, of the Wizards offseason, outside of the drafting of the three guys, related, though, is the Deni Avdija trade. And now that we've had a couple of weeks here and you've been around folks out in Vegas and had a chance to talk to people around the league, that seems to be, from talking to, for instance, your colleague Ava Wallace at the Post, it seems to be a trade that came not totally out of nowhere, but kind of out of nowhere. And I'm curious, when you talk to folks around the league and it comes up, like what is the post-mortem NBA-wide reaction to the Deni Avdija trade?
Well, look, everybody kind of sees the direction the Wizards are trying to go, and Deni is a winning player. And if, you're in a situation where you're really trying to steer towards a top draft pick, I'm not sure he prevents you from doing that, because he played a lot of minutes last year and the Wizards lost a lot of games last year, but he just might not quite be on their timeline age-wise in terms of what they're trying to build. I think the other thing that you have to look at is that losing leaves a mark. And Deni Avdija has had a really tough Wizards career. He's been there for more years than it seems. It feels like he just got there, but they've lost a lot of games during his tenure. And I could understand why somebody in that position would potentially want a change of scenery, right? It's just, it would wear on anybody in that spot. He's had multiple coaches. He's had multiple sets of teammates around him, and it doesn't really feel like they've made a ton of progress. So I could see why potentially he would be interested in a fresh start. The other aspect you have to look at, though, is that they need to have a point guard, right? And this Tyus Jones situation hasn't been resolved yet. Malcolm Brogdon would be a classic plug-in type guy there if they were to lose Jones in free agency, or if they were to, move him in some sort of a deal. And so, you can't go into next season, even if you're trying to lose, with Jordan Poole as like your only ball handler. You have to have somebody else who can kind of have a steady hand on the wheel. And I think that was probably part of their thinking here as well. And of course, they want to add the extra draft pick. They want to take a shot on a young guy as well, who they were excited about. I think that's probably a major motivating factor as well. But I think for Washington, Michael Winger now is coming up. Basically, he's been on the job for a year. We're starting to see which direction he wants to go. And this is going to be a huge season. They really need to get a great draft pick in next year's draft, because this is going to be their shot to get a foundational guy. With the players that he's assembled right now, it just feels like they're going to continue to keep cycling indefinitely, unless they can get a big time player. I like Alex Sarr. I think he's got some potential, that number 2 pick that they took. I just don't think he's going to be a franchise level player like a typical number 2 pick would be. And that's why they've got to hope that they can get that guy in next year's draft.
For sure. What's going on with Tyus? Because, last year, the trade deadline, we all thought he'd be gone. And then all of a sudden, they don't get the return they want. They hold on to him, and everyone's like, this is insanely stupid. What are you guys doing? You know he's going to leave in the offseason. They're like, whoa, we kind of want him back. And now we all thought, like, hey, this is a guy that every team would want, a Tyus Jones. What's the disconnect here where he doesn't have a team yet?
Well, I think it could be related to this idea of the new second apron era. We've seen some people just kind of hanging out there waiting for deals. Brandon Ingram's been another guy who's been just kind of waiting for resolution on his situation. And I think part of the issue could be that Typically, like, your market value, when they change the rules like this and make it harder for teams to spend money, the contracts that are available for free agents typically aren't as big as they would hope, right? And so it could be that he had fewer suitors than maybe he was expecting. It could be the numbers didn't come in where he thought. And for an incumbent team like Washington, maybe you're kind of sitting there hoping, well, if the price comes down far enough, maybe you can work a deal and keep him around. But I thought he was one of the best free agent point guards available on this summer's market. I thought there was a couple teams, especially developing teams like the San Antonio Spurs or the Orlando Magic, that should have taken a look at him just because he is such a trustworthy ball handler, amazing assist to turnover ratio, a guy who would really plug in and help, provide some structure for those young teams. Now, obviously, the Spurs went and got Chris Paul to kind of fill that role. They already have Tyus's brother, Trey Jones. Maybe they don't need both Jones brothers on the roster. So, we got to see who's interested in adding a point guard. There weren't a ton of teams this summer that actually needed point guards, so that could be part of the hang-up too. If I'm Tyus, I would, probably be interested in a different environment, just because, like we've been saying, this is a team that's, really heading to a deep rebuild. And he's a guy who's used to playing on playoff teams, playing important minutes for those teams, and, being part of winning basketball, dating back to, playing for Minnesota and Memphis. So I'm not sure it's the greatest fit there in Washington for him, but we can understand how some of these cap situations that have developed are making life more difficult for free agents.
Yeah, no doubt. And the thing is with him, it doesn't make any sense why he'd want to come back, except for he just really liked it here. Like, I will say that the thing that I keep hearing from everyone around the Wizards, it's like, yeah, no, it's a good place to work. Like, people genuinely like being here. The players feel supported. You just have to know you're signing up for not winning. And an odd number of players are like, fine. I would like to know what my role is. Maybe it's a little bigger than it would be somewhere else. And I like the people. So at least they got that going for them, which is nice, I guess.
No, I think that definitely counts as progress. And it's something that, it's more of a macro thought. But, like, you look at DeMar DeRozan going to the Sacramento Kings, or you look at Pascal Siakam signing that big contract with the Indiana Pacers. I think Rick Carlisle said that Siakam was, like, the biggest free agency move they'd ever made. I think the Sacramento Kings were saying that DeRozan's, like, the biggest player they've gotten in free agency in decades, right? These are repercussions of the new salary cap environment, right? Like, there's not enough room to have star players kind of go, team up on the same team. You've got to spread that talent out. And so, it creates opportunities for teams that have been passed over, like a Sacramento or a Washington or an Indiana. This is definitely creating opportunities for those teams to be more competitive for free agents and to, build a culture where players feel like they have a chance, right? And so for Washington, it may still be a year or two away, but, these new cap rules should help the Wizards not only retain talent, but build up a core of players that actually, can stay together and compete with the big market teams maybe in ways that they haven't in the past.
Yeah, this is the first time with the first, second apron stuff that I've ever seen owners and GMs finally actually be able to contain themselves versus just paying mediocre players top dollar. So maybe it's finally working. Maybe there will be a middle class of the NBA, Ben. Maybe.
I think you're all over it, man. I think that's exactly right. And, right now there's going to be a little bit of a pinch, right? Like, as these players are sorting through this new reality, it's kind of the opposite of when they had the cap spike in 2016
right,
and everybody got paid. But that will work itself out over the next year or two. And teams that are well positioned from a flexibility standpoint are definitely going to benefit. You saw that with Oklahoma City this summer. They had some cap space to spend, so they can go make targeted additions like an Isaiah Hartenstein to plug their front court hole. I think Washington, those guys, they're sort of Oklahoma City disciples. I think they're of the same mindset. They want to be in a flexible position, so when talent cuts free down the road, they're able to be proactive and at it.
Yeah, no doubt. It's Ben Golliver, everybody, from the Washington Post, live with us from USA Basketball's training camp in Las Vegas. Ben, appreciate you. All right, that is Ben Golliver with us from Las Vegas. When we get back here on the Hoffman Show, so Cooper Flagg, that guy, huh? Like, really, truly, that guy? So if he is, the Wizards get him. Do you feel differently about how the last, at that point, 2 years would have gone? Because they're going to be real bad again this year if they wind up with Cooper Flagg. Your thoughts on the Wizards and the pursuit of Cooper Flagg / the game of Capture the Flag that the entire NBA is playing next. 301-230-0980 here on the Hoffman Show. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. And coming up in our final half hour, or final 15, really, is the best thing from the show today and real things real people said into real microphones. We start our final half hour, though, talking about what we just talked about with Ben Golliver, which is Cooper Flagg is awesome. The 17-year-old stud who is headed to Duke next year is the next guy in terms of American basketball players. Golliver said he's the best basketball talent, American talent, since Kevin Durant, which is ridiculously high praise when you think of some of the guys who have come through in the last decade plus. That would include Steph Curry, although we didn't really know it at the time. Sometimes, hindsight's better. Like, I think Curry's has had a better career / is a better player than Durant. But again, that's one, a controversial take, and two, something that we certainly didn't know when those two were coming out of school. Zion, although I think that's colored by how Zion's actual career has gone, but there's been some really freaking good basketball players that have come out, and Cooper Flagg is a generational talent. And it would make sense that, it's about time we're due for one of these types of guys. And for him to do it within 2 years of Wembanyama coming out is kind of crazy, but that's also the globalization of the game. We're probably due for maybe our generational talents come maybe in pairs or every 5 to 10 years apart instead of every 20 years apart. MJ to LeBron to whoever's next. We're now 20 years post LeBron being drafted, and it's about that time. So with Flagg being the belle of the ball in next year's draft, I'm curious how Wizards fans look at this next year, because I think so many of you, so rightfully, are so tired of losing so much. Like, it has been mediocrity forever. Last year was supposed to be bad, but it was even worse than we anticipated. And now this year, I don't think anyone's hopes are even up, or there's no point. Like, they're not going to be a good basketball team. They certainly should be more competitive than they were last year, but I don't know that they're actually going to win that many more games, aka what Brian Keefe had at the end of last year. Now there's just more talent to watch to see if some of these young guys are going to be a part of the long-term future. But I'm curious that knowing that Flagg is out there this time, how do you look at this season compared to last season where it felt like the losing was for nothing because, okay, cool, you wound up with the number 2 overall pick, but Alex Sarr, as good as I think he can be, is not your generational type talent, your centerpiece that you're trying to acquire because it's the hardest thing to do in the NBA. Cooper Flagg, barring something going terribly wrong, is. And I think that's a game changer in terms of the anticipation for this season. Not that you're like enthusiastically rooting for them to lose now, but at least we're a little bit closer, Anthony, to the gold at the end of the rainbow.
Yeah, I definitely think how we go about the season is going to be interesting. But I just also feel as though there's going to be some player who comes along who's also going to be in, this same like bubble. So we talked about Zion, and I definitely think if Zion was healthy, he would be more.
Zion still, when he's healthy, is like one of the top 10 needle movers in the NBA.
Exactly.
He's so much better than people realize because he's hurt all the time.
Yeah, but they also might be saying, this might be the best American player since KD, just due to like pure talent. I think Zion, like, he's more brute dominant force, as opposed to, real skill. And that's what, Cooper Flagg sort of kind of has. But I say all of that to say, I think there's going to be other people that are, going to be in the conversation with him as well. So I think it's going to boil down to whether or not, like, we're really willing to, take a chance on a 17-year-old kid. Who's to say he doesn't struggle, next year, and has to stay like 2 years or something like that. Like,
the thing is, in basketball, rarely does this level of prospect, and especially after the dude just did people saw him in the Hoop Summit a couple weeks ago in Portland, and like I asked Golliver about that, as you heard in the interview. Like Ben said, I watched Ace Bailey, I watched Cooper Flagg. They're different. Flagg is a different cat. He is wired like a competitive psychopath. Like, he graduated high school early to try to get to the college and NBA ranks faster. Like, this dude he's him. Like, he's built different. And he's already got the skill level to compete with the literal very best we have in the NBA.
Yeah.
Because he just dropped like 30 or whatever it was on Team USA when this scrimmage. Like, he was giving it to Anthony Davis, to Drew Holiday. Like, if I had to pick the two players I wanted to start a franchise with from a defensive standpoint to win a championship next year, the answers are probably Anthony Davis and Drew Holiday, and he gave them the business. He's 17. He doesn't even know what he's doing yet. It's crazy. And so the chances that that level of prospect, that a Wemby, that a LeBron, that a Cooper Flagg fails in their year in college, like, it just doesn't happen. So I think it's pretty clear that this dude's going to be the number one pick, unless all of a sudden one of these other dudes comes along and shows something crazy. That if Ace Bailey or one of the two guys that's going to Rutgers of all places, Dylan Harper and who's the other Rutgers? Oh, Bailey's going to Rutgers as well. Dylan Harper, Nolan Traore, the French point guard who plays for San Quentin over there, and you'll probably see him on Team France in this Olympics. VJ Edgecombe, who is going to Baylor. Like, those dudes are really good. Hugo Gonzalez is the sixth player in this draft, and most people think it's a pretty six-player draft. Out of Real Madrid, who's a big 6'6" point guard. Like, sure, maybe one of those dudes emerges and is up there because people think that he's also generational, which is why, like, as long as you keep your pick this year, and I think that's another part of this conversation, by the way, which we'll get to in a second. As long as you keep your pick this year, you're getting a great player. But Flagg is the type that makes you competitive for championships for a decade. And, like, that should shape every decision you made, which, by the way, shapes the Denny Avdia trade. And even for the stragglers who don't understand the Avdia trade, and there definitely are some, and a lot of them really, really like Denny, and that's part of it. If you are the Wizards, you cannot lose your pick this year, and it is top 5 protected. So if you finish in the top 5, you're good, because there's only so far you can fall, right? Or if you finish with the worst record, you're definitely good. Like, you literally cannot fall out of the top 5, or maybe it's top 7 protected. It's something like that, right? Where they have to finish one of the 1, 2, or 3 worst records in the league. I'll try to look that up, and next time we have this conversation, I'll have the exact number. But they can't fall. And so if they lose an extra 2 games that Denny Avdia could have won for them, that could be catastrophic. Nevertheless, you want to, even though it doesn't guarantee you anything, you want to maximize your chances of winning this lottery. And if that means you lose 11 or you win 11 games, like, so be it. You're going to see these young guys get a ton of minutes. You're going to see them be conservative with how they treat injuries, especially to a guy like Kyle Kuzma, because while Kyle Kuzma's not a world beater, he's an excellent basketball player who can mess around and win you games. And they can't risk that, because it's just like, these types of players are impossible to get outside of winning a lottery and drafting them, because they don't get traded when they're good. Yeah, Shaq eventually played for like 6 teams. Sure. Other players that are first ballot Hall of Famers, needle movers. Kevin Durant has now played for how many teams? Phoenix is 4th. Oklahoma City, Golden State, Brooklyn, Phoenix. But that's rare. Like Russell Westbrook even. Like, when he was at his MVP peak, he played for 2 teams, Oklahoma City and Houston. You don't get this kind of player outside of drafting them when they're still worth what they're worth. The one exception that's not ever, but like the one exception is Kawhi, who forced his way out of San Antonio in a pretty, like, almost underhanded kind of way, and they knew he wasn't going to re-sign, and so with 1 year left on his contract, Toronto took a flyer, and it worked out for Toronto. And by the way, it hasn't really worked out for LA since. Like, you have to maximize your chances at getting this kid. And that means losing as much as possible, which sucks. It's not going to be fun to talk about. But playing capture the flag is the way you capture the Larry O.B. at the end of the year. Might not be until like 2029 that you're even competitive in a real major way, but unless you got a better plan, this is the way to go.
No, I don't have a better plan. I just hope we have better luck, though. We don't typically have, the best of luck when it comes to the NBA lottery, despite our losing efforts.
Yeah. You need the John Wall year to happen again.
Man.
It's happened before. You need the Kwame Brown year to happen. Then it just needs to not be Kwame Brown. That's when the Wizards look. Hey, let's win. Let's get up there in a bad year. Kwame. John was a legit number 1 overall.
Yeah, no question.
And was awesome. Just you needed more than him. And, messing up the Jan Vesely pick. Really, because that's the thing. Is like you're not typically going to get the number 1 pick and just like dip in and out. Even the Spurs that get Wemby, like their plan is to be good this year, but they had 2 more top 10 picks this year.
Yep.
Right? And one of them was their own natural selection. Like they were bad for a couple years before Wemby. They get Wemby. They're bad for 1 year with Wemby, and then they'll look to compete in year 2, and he's freaking Wemby. So is it possible by 2027 that the Wizards are, if they get Cooper Flagg, are looking to be competitive? Yeah, but in 2026 they're still going to be bad, which is good because that's also a good draft. But you have to get multiple drafts in a row right. And that's what Philly did, right? I know Simmons didn't work out long term, but they were able at least to flip him and stay competitive with like Harden, and obviously eventually they get Maxey right. But like Philly missed, but they also got enough right that they were competitive once they hit on Embiid, who's that generational type talent. He's the centerpiece. But you have to get multiple draft picks right around the big one. And so that's why you hope you've already gotten Koulibaly and Sarr right. If you get Flagg right, and then there's some sick guard in 2026, well, now you're set. Now you've got it. Yeah. But it's going to be a while because that's the only way to do it. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. When we get back, the best thing from the show today and real things, real people said, in real microphone. Wrapping up here on the Hoffman Show, Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Coming up tomorrow on the show, it's a new day. This time of year where we don't know really what's on the show tomorrow because just every day is a new adventure. What we do know is the Mystics are playing at noon, so we'll talk about Mystics Fever for sure. That game is right here on the Team 980. I'll actually be joining Doc, who's in for Sheehan, and Denton at 11:30 tomorrow. I don't know what we're talking about. Dan was just like, you want to just come on? We can talk about this, that. And I was like, sure. Might talk Euros. We might talk Copa America. We might talk Mystics Fever. I know we're going to talk some Commanders in there as well. But it's Doc, man. Who knows where that conversation could go.
I wouldn't be surprised if you guys talk Nationals.
I would be. I'd be like, Doc, you're asking the wrong dude.
Yeah.
Asking the wrong. If you want a great Nats Curious conversation, though, Clary was awesome with us yesterday at 4:30. Highly recommend. Nats are in New York tonight. And New York. Anything else that we got circled for tomorrow?
Take command.
Yeah. If you missed, one, you can just listen to it now. But in case you just are more like, no, I just like the snippets that you play on the radio show. That's good enough for me. Logan and I did an all NFC East offense. Good times. And thoroughly enjoyed it. So who are the best players in the NFC East at each position? So we'll play that for you on the show tomorrow. And then we'll see what else the world throws at us because it's a day-by-day situation. As for the best thing on the show today, really enjoyed our conversation with Ben Golliver. I don't know how we haven't had him on before. But, Cooper Flagg, that's the man the Wizards need. And Golliver was very clear about that when he joined us at 6 o'clock.
If you're a team like the Washington Wizards, Cooper is the kind of foundational player you need. If you're trying to build a winning culture, if you want a leader on the court, if you want somebody who's going to be all about basketball and no nonsense, that's going to be Cooper Flagg. And I think that's what's got the GM so excited about.
I think guys like Dawkins and Winger are like, you literally can't ask for more than, in terms of what they're trying to build, than what Cooper Flagg is. Positional size, versatility, shooting, all about basketball, no nonsense kind of guy, super hyper competitive. That's what every team wants, but it's especially what they want. If you missed the full interview with Golliver, check it out at the Hoffman Show podcast, which is available on whatever you use to listen to podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, free Odyssey app. Just search the Hoffman Show, and it will be there for you. Any other housekeeping, Anthony, before we dive into the real things the real people said into the real microphones?
Can I play closing time?
No, you should have played it.
Oh, I should have played it. You're right. I'll play tomorrow.
Played it to start the show today.
I'll play it to start the show tomorrow.
That is kind of a funny bit. It's too slow to make it a real thing because it just kills the energy coming into the show every day.
Yeah.
But it is kind of a funny bit. What songs could we use to open the show that would be really funny? Because they're songs about closing or the end.
I don't know. We'll find out tomorrow though, because I'm gonna go look up some.
If you just want to go full cartoon bit, you could do that's all, folks.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess we're going home now. Anyway, here's how we actually end the show.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All righty then. Back to Vegas we go. USA basketball, media day, all kinds of interesting things said, and really of the press conferences overall. Jason Tatum amongst those speaking. And when it comes to the teams that he's been on recently, I'm sure he's happy to be on Team USA, but he says he'd take his boys in Boston over the guys that he's playing with. Is this real?
One game, winner take all. Who you got? This year's Team USA or your championship Celtics?
You know what? When you win a championship, it gives you a little runway to, say however you say what you want and say how you feel. So I'm riding with the guys that, I just played 10 months of basketball with him, been through hell and back. So I love this team that I'm on. This is a hell of a team. It's some of the best players I ever played. But, what I just went through with my teammates and winning the championship, we locked in forever. So I'm taking us against whoever.
If it's one game and the starters get to play basically the entire, like especially if it's FIBA rules, one game, 40 minutes, I don't know that he's wrong.
Craig, this team, USA, and we haven't had
40% of the roster's the same. Tatum and Holiday are the same.
Okay, that's not 40. That's 2 players.
2 out of 5 is 40%.
Huh?
5 starters.
We're talking about teams, though.
No, I know. That's what I said. If it's one game and it's only 40 minutes, the starters are playing basically all 40 minutes.
Oh,
Look, if it's if depth is involved, then 100% Team USA.
They're probably both coming off the bench, though, Craig, for this team.
But, like, Jaylen Brown could easily be on this team.
Yeah, he could.
Derek White is literally an alternate for this team and could easily be on it.
Yeah, but he'd have a tough matchup.
And then Porzingis is 7'3" and shoots threes and
he's not
awesome.
guarding Embiid.
Yeah, it's Team USA is the correct answer.
Okay,
but it's scarily close.
Yeah, you think it would make for a good game?
Like, if it's a 7-game series, I know Malika. By the way, NBA Today, the audio courtesy there on ESPN. If Malika had asked instead a 7-game series, Team USA becomes more obviously the correct answer because then depth becomes a bigger factor, and especially if it's 48-minute games versus 40, et cetera, et cetera. But it's not a sweep.
Nah. I think they might get one. Maybe.
I think they could get one.
But I don't know, man. Having Steph, LeBron, Kevin Durant, Joel, that's just
it's not. You
good
can't
gracious.
fall over in love with the resumes.
Yeah.
Like LeBron, Steph, KD, they're not the peak of their power. They're
But I
still
just feel like-
incredible. Although apparently LeBron's the best player on the floor out there. Everyone's like, the dude's 40 years old and he's sick. Anyway. Again, tomorrow, Mystics Fever here on the Team 980. It'll be Caitlin Clark's first game since her triple-double. And she was asked, hey, anybody reach out after you broke that record?
No text messages, nothing. Nobody reached out.
In case you couldn't tell by the laughter, the look on her face, lots of sarcasm there from Caitlin Clark.
No text messages, nothing. Nobody reached out.
I'm very glad that Caitlin Clark has seemingly a very healthy sense of humor. Because for all of the stress and scrutiny she's been under this past year, if she didn't have a sense of humor, that would be terrible.
Yeah, that would be miserable. It's a lot just comes, with being at the top,
It is. And she's not new to the top.
Yeah.
She 100% is handling it extraordinarily well. By the way, tonight, can I pull this up quickly? Just one game, Minnesota, Los Angeles in the W. Loaded slate of games tomorrow. All right, that includes the Mystics noon tomorrow here on the Team 980, and we'll see you afterwards on the Hoffman Show.